Hello, hello. Welcome to the Coast to Noise podcast. This is episode number 44, where the theme of the show is local music and art all around the Gulf Coast. My guests include Johnny Cole, writer and traveling man of the Southland Music Line. You can look him and his team up at the southlandmusicline.com and see all of what they do. They do blogs and talk about different shows and all these kinds of things. It's a fantastic website, and you'll find a wealth of information of not just here on the coast, but all around the South. And they've been at it for a while, and it's a really great place, so check it out. And also with me is Eddie Dixon, musician and artist, and also fellow music and artist Will Lamons. So I will post links to all of their stuff, all of what they do, their websites and what have you, on the Coastal Noise podcast page, coastalnoise.com. Go to the podcast section. It'll be all right there. If you want to listen to any other shows, that's where you'll find it all. So we talk about a wide range of things: musicians, venues, art, sound and sound design, documentaries. So without further ado, let's hop right into it, shall we? This is Coastal Noise Podcast number 44. Enjoy. We'll just roll. I can already tell we're going to have plenty to go with, so.
You might have to shut me up. Just say time to stop, Johnny.
So we got Johnny Cole here of the Southland Music Line and Eddie Dixon with us. Will's going to be joining us in a little bit. And we're basically going to be talking a lot about music and specifically, I think, the local scene here. And Johnny, I would really like it if you would kick off kind of that, because I understand you have a history of the coast, of the scene here, and just, can you tell us a little bit about what Southland Music Line is and what y'all do?
Well, first of all, I appreciate you inviting me to be part of this.
Absolutely.
It's a real privilege.
Well, we met at Ben's place at the Irish Coast Pub and got to talking for about an hour and just, super engaged in the conversation until the music pretty much overtook us in volume. So I knew from the start that I wanted to have you on and just to hear more. We had a shared relation for love of music and what have you. So I thought this would be the perfect setting to just hear more from it.
Well, like I said, it was enjoyable that night. I had a good time. What we do at the Southland Music Line is we basically we travel across the South. We try to promote the scene here from the South Mississippi to other parts of the region throughout the South. One of the things we tried to do is also let people know about what we got down here, but also try to encourage people to come down and check out the scene here with the venues here on the coast. We have a website, www.southlandmusicline.com. Of course, we do a lot with our social media. It's a different world today. Music's totally different than it was years past. It's a learning process. Basically, the Southland Music Line, we're principally, it's three of us. That's if you go to the website, you see three pictures. It's my shot of me, and of course, there's Steven Anderson, who's a photographer. He's been doing this for years. He's very good knowledge of the scene here between New Orleans and Mobile. Very colorful history, someone you might want to use in the future to talk here on the show. And the other is Robbie Ambonette. A lot of people know Robbie. Robbie is a gifted painter. He paints live performances of bands. He's probably been photographed by more people than anybody on the coast because everybody, when he's painting, these people are drawn to him to come up and take a picture of him. So he's probably, the back of his head's been on more pictures than anybody on the coast. But what we do, last year I think we traveled about all over the particularly the South and up the East Coast, and we did. I say personally, I saw probably 200 some shows last year. We went to South by Southwest. We're going to be doing it again this month. We also did a few what we call mini tours of the South. We did some up to Nashville a few times. We went up the East Coast, saw some bands up there, and even as far up as Maryland, Athens, Georgia. So I mean, we basically get around. And we've seen some great festivals this past year. The B.B. King, his final homecoming at Indianola. We went to the Bogaloo Blues Festival. So my point is we get around, and it's a great bit of enjoyment. It's not so much nothing about the money. It's about promoting what we love. Mm-hmm. And me and Steven Anderson, we are kind of be liking this probably like the two guys from the Muppets, the two guys that usually stand we bicker about like that. It just doesn't matter what subject matter it is. It's usually music, of course. Debating who should be in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame and who should not be. That might be a good discussion one day. But just don't get him in there on that one.
How does he feel about Rush? Is Rush in the Hall of Fame? He thinks basically after the first 10 people were inducted, it should stop there.
Rush got inducted?
Yeah, they're in the Hall of Fame. Okay, but I'll start bringing up a list of names and stuff, and I said, well, these guys haven't been inducted yet. And he's like, well, they should. Oh, then there's the argument goes.
I saw a great picture of a Rush show, and someone had gone to the bathroom and taken a picture of the line outside the men's restroom, and then the absolute absence of a line outside the women's restroom.
That's about right. And then you've got Geddy Lee, who his songs that are about the classic rock and roll. Hey baby, come this way, in his voice, it loses me on it every time.
Well, I don't know. It's Pert writes the lyrics, and
right,
it actually,
right, which makes it even weirder.
It's the stuff going the opposite way that loses me. Like, Jesus Christ, I'm fucking talking Cygnus X1, or like to me, it's all like gets off into so much sci-fi and stuff that it kind of reeks of teenage a little bit.
Well, I actually like Rush. Actually, I've seen them before, and it's been years past. But actually, I was talking to somebody last night that I think they're getting ready to be in New Orleans or somewhere, and he's excited about going. And I liked his enthusiasm about seeing the Rush.
I saw the Show Me Don't Tell Me tour with them. A buddy had tickets and he took me, and I was blown away. It was pretty awesome seeing them live. They had a huge screen and like doing all these videos as they were going.
I've seen them in New Orleans for their time travel tour or something like that, and it was like they did all of their not all of it. I mean, they've got so much stuff. I've got a cousin who has all their albums framed in his living room exactly like chronologically.
I think about that Paul Rudd movie. What's the movie where he got married and
I Love You Man.
I Love You Man. Yeah. And they went to the Rush show, and two guys acting like two guys acting crazy. But it was that's my think of Rush when I think of that now. But basically, like I said, that's what we do at Southland, and I think the thing about the Mississippi Gulf Coast, a lot of people will say, well, there's no scene here. Of course, we're not like, you think of music scenes, you think places like Athens and Chapel Hill, North Carolina, and there's great scenes, and I've gone there, and I love those places. But the coast has a long tradition of history with music, and I mean, you can go back to the you love the blues. I mean, there's recently the Mississippi Blues Trail Association organization there awarded or put a marker up in Gulfport about the Gulfport Boogie, or he was talking about some of the Jamo, and when another guy there went on to play with the Allman Brothers. But I mean, it was
they're from this area.
Yeah, actually, they were from, I think one of them was maybe born in Ocean Springs or Gulfport, but they were we had that scene. There's been this influence from New Orleans with the jazz. One artist once said it was called Mississippiana. I mean, the Louisiana influence. I think I forgot who was the guy that said that, but so you have that scene, and there's always been down through history. One of the things that I remember from my growing up childhood here on the coast. Yes, I've lived elsewhere and lived in New York and different places, but this is my home. And when I think about the past and hearing about places, Stephen talks about this a lot. It's places like the Vapors in Biloxi, and the Fiesta, and the Beach Club, and places like that. And there was a place in Pascagoula called the Alley. There was a lot of artists that played there. I think the Vapors had a lot of touring bands that came through from all over the country. Grassroots, Jerry Lee Lewis played there. There was others. And there were a lot of regional bands that came through this area. The Chords were from Milton, Florida. There was, of course, there was Little Dave and the Giants from Laurel. There was one band called Eternity Children. Actually, a guy's a Facebook friend of mine is Bruce Blackburn. He went on to was in a band called very 70s music. Starbuck did the song Moonlight Feels Right. You probably have heard it on some oldies station. But the thing is, there's been a lot of ones that's come along through here, and you got to give them a lot of credit.
So a band came from Laurel.
Yeah, there was
Mississippi.
well, yeah, there was a lot of these bands, and I'm sure some of these guys might still be playing somewhere. And of course, Jimmy Buffett's from the coast. Years later, of course, Three Doors Down came out of off the coast and went on to.
Did you? I remember from high school. Do you remember? They seemed at the time to be sort of a force. What's happening now? Just at the time, they seemed like they were all over the place. Was Change to Eden? Do you remember those guys?
That is a name that it just ring a bell, but
yeah.
I was probably not here at the time. Might have been somewhere else, those kind of bands, you got to give them a lot of credit, and we see that today too. A few years ago, about 4 or 5 years ago, what really struck me as something very interesting was a series of young musicians from Gulfport. And some of you know these guys and these people, and that started really putting an emphasis. They were good friends, and that was what struck me, is they were loyal, good friends to each other. They played in each other's bands. They had side projects. One of them led one of the bands, went on to won a national contest, went on to perform. I got signed a deal to do an album, and they went to Europe, performed in a show over there. Rosco Bandana, you all know them, and they're beloved here on the coast. Jason's a great guy, and what he did is
he almost joined us today.
Yeah,
but he said next time. He's with us in spirit, he said.
Jason's a great guy, and but there was several musicians like that were really concentrating on trying to make a difference with original music. And of course, there were great cover bands too. A lot of times people knock cover bands, but you really shouldn't. I mean, they're really a part as much as the original music. And there's nothing great as a great cover, I mean, I feel that way. But I really was impressed with the fact that Jason and different ones were really trying to write their music, and that was I was impressed with that. And we've seen it. There's still last night there was I didn't get to see the band premiere at Irish Coast Pub, but I was in Mobile seeing a band at Callahan's called Great Peacock from Nashville. Awesome band, but I'd left Mobile, and
Peacocks are weird birds.
Well, those guys had some pretty interesting suits and outfit on their back of their coat. They had their peacock on.
Oh, they're actually doing that?
Yes.
Semi-nudie?
Yeah, actually, it was interesting. But they were a great band. But I left Mobile, drove over here to Gulfport. That's where we're at today. And caught the end of Della Memoria's show. And but I'm looking forward to seeing that other band. It was
how does the little bits I've heard of Della's stuff sounded electronic. What does she play with live? Who does she have with her when she's playing live? What kind of setup?
Well, it's a three-piece. And Josh, actually, all of the members there at one time were part of Rosco, but they started even before that. They were some of that group of musicians I spoke of. Emily Scholl's an amazing talent. I think she's been on one of your podcasts before, her and Jason.
Yeah, she's incredible.
But she's an incredible vocalist, and she
does the keyboard. It's kind of a synthy electronic.
It's interesting,
and she plays the guitar too. She played at the Mississippi Juke Joint, and I watched her there, and she kind of mostly emphasis on the keys.
I got you. Fair enough.
But yeah,
and then Patrick McGinley, he's played drums. He's an amazing drummer. Yeah, it's the thing about, regardless with bands, like mentioned Rosco, they go through different changes. They all continue to evolve. Members come, go, but that's part of music, But I was always very impressed with the fact that the friendship a lot of these had, it really, to be honest with you, it had a real impact in getting the Southland started, because I started seeing some new bands coming out of the scene, and I would say, it's maybe something to write about. And this past year, the Southland, we did about 40 articles on the blog site. And I hope we'll do about that this year. We're trying our best. But like I said, that's the scene here is, we're in the middle of two great markets. I mean, New Orleans and lower Alabama is a thriving scene in the Mobile area. I don't want to get into that subject, but because I'll be here for a while talking about it.
Something actually, this just occurred to me when you said Alabama. There's a guy, my buddy was involved with putting a band together for him, and he backed him up a lot. I played with him like maybe twice. But Ralph Soul Jackson from Phoenix, Alabama. Phoenix City, Alabama, which is right across the border from it's like right on the Mississippi Alabama border. Right. That dude's amazing. Like, he's an old soul guy. He put out a single in the 70s of a cover of Sunshine of Your Love. And then my buddy Adam and his friend blanking John Seba in Chicago, they recorded an album with him, and it was like this long sort of journey to have him be rediscovered. And he booked him gigs and all that, but it was absolutely like herding cats or something, like, because Ralph had a pretty active home life. He was playing in his church and everything else, and at one point he was supposed to catch a flight up for a gig, and his recording studio out back behind the house had caught fire. There was a fire in the walls that he couldn't find, so he missed the flight. They called him. They're like, "Why aren't you here?" He's like, "My house is on fire." I was like, all right, but I think it finally came out. That album might have finally came out, but Ralph is an absolute character. Like, we played with him at the Park West in Chicago, opening for Sharon Jones and the Dap Kings.
Yeah.
And when we got through with the show, like, the show was maybe, our set with him was, I think, maybe 5 songs. But, of course, everything's dragged out, and it goes up, it goes down. He brings people up to dance and everything else. Like, he did Sunshine of Your Love and hardly ever actually sang the song until it would come around to the chorus. He was Sunshine of Your Love. Everything else was just bringing somebody up and making them dance.
And we talk about covers, covers. Yes. And here's a great cover from somebody.
And when he got through with his show, and this is where I'll stop because this is my favorite memory. We got through with the show, and everybody's turning around, shaking hands, like, "Oh, that was great." And Ralph's gone. Where the hell did Ralph go? And I went back to the dressing room, and he had gotten a little bit overheated, so he took his pants off. He was in the dressing room with his shirt unbuttoned, a bottle of whiskey, and he'd taken his pants off because it was hot out there, stage lights and everything else. So he'd just gone out and just knocked the socks off the Park West full of people and just blitzed his way back to the dressing room and stripped down. So,
That's a
you have to have some priorities.
It's amazing how many people you just never hear of, and you hear someone like this, and you say, "Well, I want to check this out." That's what the coast here. We got so many people like that. It's been playing here on the coast, and just really amazing talents. One over in Jackson County, he's played for years, and I just love talking to him. And he's a great musician, and he's by the name of Truett Williams. He's a really great guy, and but you just talk to these guys, and you really start learning stuff. And we so often concentrate what's just going on in the present, and we think, I always hear this, "Oh, there's nothing going on here, it's boring." But you start looking through your past and your history. I always say you can't go forward until you look at the past, and I think that's one of the things. Hopefully, if the coast is to. If the scene is going to actually continue to grow, which I hope it does, or develop into something more, that people will start, learning about some of these people from the past and these artists.
I'd be interested to see on the coast when the 60s wave of stuff happened. Of course, Mississippi and Alabama would have been as resistant as hell to near about any of the cultural inroads that were and things like that. But I bet you there were still. Somewhere here in Mississippi, there were still some garagey psychedelic bands. Oh,
definitely. Those bands I mentioned to you earlier, like the Chords, different ones. They and Andy Stephen, my partner there in the Southland, he can really tell you more about that than I could, because he actually was a young man at that time, and he's an interesting guy. He left. To give a little history about him, I always say he used to with the warehouse in New Orleans. He was there in the beginning. I was there at the end when it shut down. But he actually, one time, it was the Atlanta Music Festival, International Music Festival, back in 69, 70, I think he went. It was the biggest crowd I think Jimi Hendrix ever played at. He caught he he hitchhiked from Searstown in Pascagoula to Atlanta to see that, and I think he was like 18, 19 years old. That was the kind of guy he was, but he could tell you about a lot of these bands, and there were these type bands. Just because Mississippi is a certain way, especially in those days. Kids are kids, young people are young people. You're going to always, and they, there's those type of bands.
The psychedelics scene in a lot of ways nowadays are just like synth keyboards on one chord and then just some like doodling, and it just like hangs in the air. It's not like these, really what I would think progressive of like Pink Floyd with their concept albums that expand like all this, space.
I knew for a while there in Chicago, like the, when they talk about the psych stuff, rather than like trippy psych, it's more about like the Roky Erickson sort of garagey stuff, real jangly and aggressive stuff like that. And like for a while there, that like it just got all sorts of love in Chicago. Alex White is one of the bands, and then VD, who was a friend of mine, but VEEDEE. I don't know if he's still playing under that name or whatever, but it was very much like that garagey side of it, rather than what you're talking about, the more like expansive, and like that's something that people pick up easily, because it usually is just a few chords and some tripped out lyrics about something that doesn't make sense.
Like Tama Impala, they're a band that's pretty good, and they're kind of doing their thing with that genre. And then who's some?
I think it is Tame, isn't it? I don't know.
TAMA.
Oh, is it? Fair enough.
I believe they're going to be doing the I think Shaky Knees this year, and they might be at Hangout this year too. I can't remember, but yeah, they're a great band. There's some really good ones. And you're talking about the garage type stuff. That's it's playable. It's not taking it too serious. And I love that part. That's one of the things I loved about, particularly about. Here I'm gonna get off the subject, but I guess this is what it's about. We just discussed music, right? But just the whole punk rock scene. I was in New York, and I'm not going to get on this too much, but the CBGB days, and I was there. And so, well, not in the infancy of that, but I was there in the part there in the 80s, but there was that vibe. There was all that going on. Athens had that. It was before REM was just when there was other bands like Pylon and ones like that, Love Tractor. It was interesting. I always hoped that this would develop here on the coast. It's hard for an area that's not a really, you think college towns, and the coast is so spread out. It's really, you got Hancock County and over here in the Harrison, and Pascagoula's more pools from the Mobile area and stuff. So it's kind of spread out. It's hard to do that, but I still have hope, and it's there's people really trying, and that's one of the things I think was just discussing here is we want to see that. I mentioned before I was talking before we came online here about venues. We met at Ben Kaufman's the Irish Coast Pub. I think he's doing a great job. I love his enthusiasm, his way of promoting the music scene. He's done a lot for the local bands. He himself's a musician, so he understands that end of it.
And a good-looking man.
Very unique beard.
Handsome.
Very unique beard right now.
Devilishly handsome.
Devilishly.
If his wife hears us talking about this, we could all three be in trouble. Yeah, okay. But Ben, I've enjoyed getting to know Ben through the course of the time that he's had the Irish Coast Pub there in Gulfport, and the sound's improving. It's a work in progress. But his open mic nights has
have
really
been around,
off,
but they've really taken off, aren't they?
And like you were saying, you just you met us like in this last couple of weeks or whatever. I've been going to their open mic kind of very sporadically for months or whatever, and it has really gone from that couple people here and there to the same kind of group to this thing that's like become pretty solid of what you're going to get when you go there. And the sound's really improved, and they've got their little sound board area right there that Jason's usually working on, or Diggs or whoever else, and
Yeah.
And it's really
You got to give
tuning
Diggs
up.
a lot of credit too. He's really good at it.
He holds it together.
And I tell you what, he's a
so much
very
of it.
talented person. You got to get him to do a Tom Waits version of his Tom Waits song, but there's several people who's done it. But Downtown Train, I mean, he really does a great one. But I really do think they've got something going good. It's more of a jam session thing now, and it's a lot of different ages. It's not just a certain age. We got all ages there. All kinds of people are showing up, and that's good. That's great. A second place and not to be over talking too much as I usually do, but is over in Jackson County is Jack's by the Tracks. Both of you guys said you haven't heard of Jack's, and I like it. It's almost like we travel so much, and we do, but I see a lot of shows at Jack's, like I do at Ben's too. But Jack's by the Tracks is ran and operated by Mark Garrison. Mark is a very unique, colorful character, and he great love for music, passion, love for guitars. But one of the things that I am most impressed about Mark and Jack's by the Tracks is the kind of talent he keeps showing up at his venue. It's based basically on, I have to think, they just love coming into play for that very loyal group of people that his patrons are very regulars. I guess I'm one of those. Someone once told me, actually it was Robbie, I said, I was on my bar stool, I said, which the guy of Cheers am I, Norm or Cliff? He said, I think you're both. So it tells a little something about me. But the thing about Jack's is they pull a lot from, not just from locally, but he's getting people from Austin, Nashville, Muscle Shoals. He's getting a lot from the Mobile, Lower Alabama area. One band that I cannot stress enough that you guys got to see is a husband-wife team. They got a new album coming out in, I think, you can pre-order it now, is Sugarcane Jane. Anthony Crawford and his wife, Savannah, are two of the most amazing, talented people I have ever met. And I really, Anthony, the thing about Anthony is he has written songs for a great many people. And he's performed with the likes of Dwight Yoakam. He's got the start, I think, with Sonny James. That's going way back. And he played with Steve Winwood. Actually, where I first got knowledge of anything to do with Anthony, he played for years there with Neil Young. And so he's been on the big stage and played for large festival amounts. And here he is playing at Jack's. And just amazingly, he comes in there and he does what they do. And it's refreshing, and it's a real privilege.
This is the same guy that's in the husband wife.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. They're also part of the kind of a local super group of sorts. Is Willie Sugar Caps with Grayson Caps and Will Kimbrough, Corky Hughes. But they've really gotten in fact, that album, I think, under an independent awards type thing, got independent Americana Album of the Year last year at one award ceremony. So I mean, they're definitely something to see, Willie Sugar Caps. But their project, Sugarcane Jane, I'm going to stress that, has got a new album coming out, and they really are somebody to see. And that's going back to my original point, if that makes sense, is that's the kind of people that's showing up at Jack's by the Tracks, and I really think people should try to check people out like that.
I'd written off Pascagoula. I go there to take pictures of the gantries and the cranes over by the water, and that's about it. Well, drive through, maybe go to Staples.
With Robbie and Andy Steven there, he goes by Andy too. I say that. They kept telling me I was over at Ben's, and they would tell me, "Oh, come over and you gotta go to Jack's by the Tracks." It's Pascagoula. I mean, my brother was born there. I mean, that's people there, family there. But I kept thinking, well, what's going to be over there? Well, I was impressed, and it is right by the tracks. It's right across the parking lot, and there's the railroad, and it's a cool place.
It's on the list for sure now.
Yeah.
Whatever. At the very least, I'll drop off I like the idea of somebody that's that picky. I'll go ahead and drop off a demo and see if I make it through the gauntlet. I like people where it's not quite the everybody gets a medal.
Well,
but it's like someone that's actually got an opinion. I like it.
We got some good places here on the coast.
Yeah.
I mean, they're in Ocean Springs. I mean, if you haven't driven down Ocean Springs in the last 3 or 4 years, they're on Government Street. It's quite.
I love the grocery.
Yeah.
And the night that I played at the what's the underneath Julep
Room.
There was hardly anybody there, but I could imagine that if it was full of people, that'd be a blast.
There was a night that the Julep Room, Michael Schaefer used to book the music there, and there's someone else right now doing it. But it's the Julep Room is there was a band from New Orleans called Wooden Wings. They're a really good band. It's and you talking about like playing loud somewhere. Oh, they really turned up the volume, and it was they're exciting, and it was Julep Room was one of those kind of places.
Shake some of the souvenir license plates and stuff off the
probably
walls.
So.
I
love the Julep Room. I always have.
What does the sound like because you told us that we might think about trying to get in there or something like that. What does the sound like in that place when you're playing as loud as you can, especially like in a rock scenario? Because the walls is brick, right?
It is somewhat in a cellar.
Yeah.
It's a very low ceiling.
I would think that would like kill people. You know what I mean? Like it would.
I've seen all kinds perform there, and
masochists.
It's
just
it's
invite people that love being hurt.
It's got Julep Room's got a long history there too.
Yeah.
It's actually I think Elvis used to show up there.
Yeah, Mike was telling me that Elvis used to come through.
I don't know if he so much performed there, but he showed up when he used to come down the coast area. And
I haven't seen him.
Actually, that was the first concert I went to.
We have some news. This will be a good podcast point to tell you.
Actually, Elvis was the first concert I went to back in 1973 was the first actual concert
How old were you?
I was young, but I went with my parents. I had great parents. Both of them are passed on now, but they encouraged me to.
73 you saw him?
73.
So Jumpsuit Elvis.
Oh yeah, that's. I'm not going to go back to the Sun Record years. I'm not. Gonna, but the thing is, I remember it well. It influenced me from that day. I just said, I know what kind of stuff I want to do. I was never good enough.
The
to be a
history
musician,
of Elvis versus like the Beatles and him like cozying up to Nixon and things like this. Like at one point he offered himself up as some sort of operative for the United States against communism. Once he got big enough, like as things got more and more twisted in his life, he's got the jungle room and whatever at home, and he's also offering himself. He thought the Beatles were like a bad influence on America, and he also just was super anti-communist. So he offered himself up as some sort of.
Well, the Beatles actually went to Graceland. You ever went to Memphis, Graceland, Sun? It's worth seeing.
Yeah.
They actually showed up there. They were amazing. Like they said, they were like 4 Elvises.
Yeah, they wanted to meet the king.
That whole story with Elvis and Nixon. I think he showed up with the White House with actually carrying a gun. And he got away with it. So, I mean, the story, they actually made a movie about it's called Elvis and Nixon or something. It was a made for HBO movie. And it's kind of,
it's like a buddy cop movie or something.
It's interesting. And, I guess I could say there was only one Elvis.
Nixon is Danny Glover, and he's like, I'm too old for this shit.
And the other one's Will Ferrell. And
Elvis is all crazy, and he's karate chopping.
They got pictures with Elvis, and he's got that jumpsuit kind of thing on there, standing next to Nixon. It's interesting. But I could say, I guess Elvis had a big impact on me wanting to do what I do. But I was the first one. And, but that's got a little bit of story there. There's actually quite a bit of Elvis connection story here on the coast, and I'll say that for
there's
another day.
The photographer that took so many Elvis pictures that were disseminated. Like he was somebody that was allowed him. He was allowed to just follow Elvis around. And one of the pictures is of Elvis sitting at this console granny organ somewhere and playing and singing gospel. And I was like, damn it, where is that album? Like I would love to hear Elvis, however good or bad he is as far as organ playing, but just Elvis sitting at an organ playing gospel. That would blow my brain, and maybe it exists somewhere on some like big pile of tape in a room.
How much music wonders this we've never heard. That's by a lot of people, it's, but I definitely, I remember, I think it was when I was very young, early on when I was in grade school, we're talking kid. they asked, what do you want to be when you grow up? I said, I want to be Elvis. So of course I didn't make that Elvis person, but I did.
There's still time.
There's still time. I'm long past his age when he passed on, but maybe, who knows? I might get one of those jumpsuits.
Yes,
he's definitely.
I had an idea of like, because there is the problem when you're playing, like touring and playing shows. In general, you got like, you got a bag that you're bringing with you. It's got all your clothes for whatever, and I'm like touring for a month. I put just a pile of, thinking that I'll wash things every so often. But I was thinking actually at one point of just doing a completely ghetto nudie suit by getting like a black or dark colored like mechanic's jumpsuit and just bedazzling the hell out of it. Just random. Right? You don't know the bedazzler? You're too young.
I know the
bedazzler. But so just bedazzle the hell out of the suit, and you just have random rhinestones all over this black jumpsuit. It still might happen. So that's my idea.
Hey, that band I saw last night, the Great Peacock. Like I said, he had that peacock on the back of his blazer. I love that stuff. I think that throwback to that kind of stuff from the Porter Wagner, kind of outfits. Like you said.
Have you ever heard like where I used to live in the country, or where I used to visit in the country? My family. Somebody down the road kept peacocks, and at nightfall and at dusk they start screaming. Oh, and it sounds like a human female screaming. Our
neighbor.
Thing.
I'm from Van Cleve, and so we're out there in the country. But it's growing up there. It's still a little different. Actually, I live right in the middle of town, so I'm one of the city folks there. Yeah. But our neighbor, they had peacocks, and he was right. They'd come in our yard sometime. They'd come down.
It's so freaky, especially if it's far enough away that it's a little bit rough around the edges. Like, what the hell was that? It's peacocks.
But that's a.
I took it recently. I drove up through on 57 to go to Hattiesburg, and I took a picture of the Van Cleve Volunteer Fire Department, and it's like a single one of those tinned outbuildings with a big door on it, and it just has one little white and red sign that says Volunteer.
Now I got to correct you here. That's our branch. That's our branch fire department. We got one with two doors. Now it's hey, I'm getting myself in trouble with some people who just don't talk bad about our home.
Yeah.
I'm not going to say anymore. I do live in Van Cleve, so it's home.
My big crush in high school, she lived out there, and they had this big house, and they kept goats. It was awesome. Like, everybody would go out there. They would have enormous parties at her house. It was amazing.
Yeah, I can't talk about it too much. I got to go back there tonight sometime. I pull in.
It's a big place.
Jay Twilbeck, that is the band director at Van Cleve.
Really?
And that's a friend of mine from high school. So.
Yeah, it's funny. A lot of people go perform at the Shed. You mentioned we talking about they got some great people come there, but it's now listed as Ocean Springs. And for years, kids from that area went to Van Cleve High School, and so I still can't get used to calling it Ocean Springs, or I think Gaucher's also got the limits there. So I just always call it the Highway 57 I-10 Crossroads. I think that's kind of a little cooler with the blues kind of thing they're trying to do there.
But Shed, the owner, is a very cool dude too. He collects vintage cameras and seems like he's got a lot going on in his head. Other than just barbecue.
Hey, it's for a long time I didn't. It was another place I didn't go a lot because I do go other places when I travel and I started going there and they get some great music there. We talked about Jimbo Mathis a little earlier, and different ones like that, and of course Sugarcane Jane performs there. I tell you, someone I talked to the other day, and he's an amazing talent. He's from above the coast here. Is Kerry Hudson. A lot of people love Kerry Hudson, and he's a guy that he goes.
Oh yeah, I saw him in Hattiesburg.
Right,
he played at the depot. No, it's a small right on the main road in Hattiesburg at downtown, right before it gets to like the train station.
Not the Thirsty Hippo, or is it?
Not the Thirsty Hippo. It's a little tiny. Well, he was playing at the front of this little tiny place. It was awesome.
What's cool about him is this is a guy his history goes way back. He's one of the actually Jason Isbell. You know who we're talking about?
Yeah.
Jason Isbell. When we saw him perform at Brewski's in Hattiesburg. He entered. Kerry opened for him, and he said he was one of America's treasures. I mean, he's really one of the guys that really kind of had a whole lot to do with the whole beginning stages of Americana. I mean, with bands like Wilco, Uncle Tupelo, all that whole period. But I talked to him the other night, and he plays everywhere. And and what really struck me is so interesting about, we talking about people that we get to meet, is someone like him he's doing it because he totally loves what he's doing. And it doesn't matter. It gets me sometimes too, and you're musicians, and when you go somewhere and you see this amazing talent that's up on stage, and there's not a whole lot of people there, and if they're there, they don't exactly know who's up there, and it's like, you people don't know who this guy is. Maybe I'm a little too much music. I guess I think about it too much, but
it definitely is.
But it's just it's amazing who some of these guys and people are up there.
That's an easy, as a musician, that's an easy way to kill any gumption you got, is if you really start thinking about the amount of amazing shit you see that never gets anywhere. Like, I would lose my mind if I really think about it. Those, and the fella that I worked with in Chicago named Serengeti, he's the closest being around him, I was like, okay, this is one of those genius people, with all the good and the difficulties that implies, but he was that good. Like, Robert Christgau wrote an entire page where he went down and reviewed all of his albums and pretty astutely said, like, if you look at any one facet of what this guy does, it might not like plow you under, but if you look at a body of the sheer volume of creativity of this dude, it'll kill you. And it's true. And that guy has been on the cusp. Like, he's had deals, he's had, international tours, things like this, and always seems to be almost popping off. And then something awful will happen and just torpedo the whole thing. Yeah. And there's so many of those stories. And not to mention, like, in Hattiesburg, when I say in air quotes, I went to college. I didn't really go to the actual school very much, but I moved to the town where the school was. And the bands that I was exposed to there, and at the time I was playing music too, but the bands that were playing there that I did not understand in retrospect were so much cooler. And these people would have survived and thrived on the national stage if they'd gotten out there. Like, if some of those had popped up now, where you can get things out and about so easily, they might have had, that stuff stands up to almost anything that I saw in Chicago the whole time I was there. I was in Chicago for 15 years. And, but you got to block it out of your head and just plug your ears out.
Hattiesburg's got some great bands up in that area. It's some good venues too. Thirsty Hippo, we just mentioned now. I love that place, and it's got some. There's an artist that actually performed his second show was at Ben Kaufman's, and this guy named Jeremiah Strickland. They go by the band's called Oh Jeremiah, and the guy he's up recording his first album in Portland, Maine. I think here pretty shortly. He's done a couple EPs they've done, and I always astonished at this guy. He books his own music. He does these incredible touring, and he gets some of the same places some of these big known promoters get some of these bands in. And there's Jeremiah's booked at the same venue, and he's done it on his own. But he's very talented, and
I need to steal his brand at that point. If he manages,
I love his music and love what they're doing, but I'm as impressed with his ability of doing that as I am anything.
I'm probably going to have to show up in Hattiesburg and give Brad at Thirsty Hippo some sort of back rub or something. I've sent him so much stuff, and everybody I talk to, like, I've had people in Hattiesburg speaking on my behalf, and he will not be moved. He's a certain person that, and every time I mention that to my folks in Hattiesburg, say, well, Brad's kind of like that. So do something. So I'm going to show up and we'll just have to make out or something.
He just booked the band, the Mulligan Brothers. I think they are. Have you guys heard the Mulligan Brothers?
Nope.
That's another band you'll need to see. They're from Mobile. And Graham's from Ocean Springs, or he lives.
What was the Sugar
Cane Jane?
I'll give you a whole good list of. Hey, check out the website. I got articles and everything on there. But hey, it's They just got booked up there, and that was, I think Jeremiah he kept saying, when are you going to book that? Asking I think Brad, and I think he finally did, and I think this is a band. If there's any band I think cannot see not making it from the Gulf Coast. This whole, I'm talking about from New Orleans to Mobile, is this band. I just cannot see them not making it. Now I've been wrong before, but I think that this was one that they got the amazing talent and the singing, songwriting, the writing, the musician skills, and they're great guys, and they deserve it. They really do.
Without putting their sort of dirty laundry out in the street or anything, but where does did Rosco, when they won a contest and they got a deal, I'm guessing for an album or something like that. Did they put out that album?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, and then that was the
it's
extent of the contract.
Yeah, their debut album. Yeah,
and then at that point, that was the extent of the contract. And
well, they went on a long tour, and they were promoted for that course of time. And it was a new company. I was through that had that record. It was, I think, the first band that actually they recorded under, with Hard Rock Records.
So them splitting off into the different creative things that they're doing now didn't scuttle the whole thing.
They've always had side projects. There's always been different projects. Just I mentioned asked about Della earlier, and I don't want to get into too much stuff, but they came along the same time. And at the same, it was, and then some of them it was. Friends are friends. And, that's what's so cool about some of these bands. They'll be a while, and there'll be another one, and they'll get over and they'll play with this guy, and they'll play with this band, and that's kind of the way it was. And there were some really interesting projects they did along the way.
Get back together and be Richard and Linda Thompson. Singing songs about each other.
But it's that's right now. It's with Rosco.
That's the only when I just recently moved back to the coast, and that was the only name I heard of. That seemed to be ubiquitous. That people seemed to be doing. Somebody was doing something.
It's kind of funny. I have talked about. I used to really talk about them a lot when they were first got that thing, the contest, and they won that, and started seeing them, and I got to be good friends with Jason and all of them, and but I was talking on social media mostly at the time. So I was at a Blondie show in Atlanta, Georgia, to see the band Blondie, and after the show, this guy came up to me and somehow he says, "You're that Rosco Bandana guy." I was thinking, "What? Why you?" And what it was because I talked about him all the time, and it was kind of cool the fact that he learned about Rosco through me talking on. How many people you have on Facebook friends that you don't really know?
Somebody I knew from way back when in Hattiesburg. He's got a Facebook page called the Hattiesburg Musical Mecca, and he has shows coming out of his ears. I don't know. He is an amazing songwriter and singer. When I met him back then, that weird feeling of being around somebody that's kind of touched with genius and also touched. He always said his name was Scott Panther back then. I don't know what he's playing under now. I have no idea what he's
that's so hard
himself.
when you
I have no idea, but I know he's booking and promoting a ton of shows up there. 4 or 5 band bills and all this other stuff. I don't have a whole hell of a lot more, but I'll almost guarantee you that in that pile of bands, there's some interesting stuff because he was part of that nexus of these. The other bands that
I got to get some of these names from you. We got to share some names after this discussion here because that's what we you feed on. You try to find out about these new bands. It's different, interesting stuff.
I want to throw one out there that because y'all have named so many people. I want to throw out one out that I don't know if y'all might. Have you heard of Bob Log the Third?
Yes,
you've heard of him
with the helmet and the
yeah. He's you ever heard of him?
Is he Mississippi? I don't even know. He was on Fat Possum for a minute,
right?
Wasn't he?
Yeah.
So he was up there.
Let's find out. He to give a little background on him. He wears. He's a one-man band, right foot to play the bass drum, left for the hi-hat. He does slide guitar, blues stuff. He wears what I think is a jet fighter's suit and a helmet, and he goes around town stealing the microphones out of payphones out of booths and putting it, like wiring it into this helmet, which he sings into. And he sings songs like "Boob Scotch" and "Come Over Here, Put Your Shit on My Knee," and like he's like, you know, he's like an entertainer in sorts and all this kind of stuff. And he'll get girls to come up on stage while he's playing the bass drum.
Where is he out of?
Who we're gonna find out right now.
Give him a call. You got a phone here.
But
I know he was signed. I'm pretty sure he was signed
to Fat Possum. Yeah. But he's just very eccentric, and there's a really great interview with like some like independent blogger like interviewing him, and he's just telling stories about, you know, did this show and then he came back and then there was this hooker and there was cocaine and then he got locked out on the balcony with no clothes on and people were walking by and all he has
that's happened to all of us, really. When we get down to it.
Let's see, Bob.
Do you remember like when they were just like solidly playing when I was back in college, but Dash Rip Rock?
Oh, they're still around. They're still around.
I imagine their livers might not be.
Well, they're good guys. I can say them about it. They actually play Government Street occasionally still.
Oh, okay.
Well, you know, they're in I think the Louisiana Music Hall of Fame. I mean, they're definitely an amazing band.
I never once looked up their name that they weren't playing a bunch of shows.
I had a friend of mine who was a good friend of a lot of people that go to Jack's regular, like myself. Jeff Painter, he passed away this past year. Good guy, and that was his band. And he was a kid. He was, I guess, somewhere about my age now, but he got pictures on his. You can see when he was young. He got the Dash Rip Rock shirt, and they've been an amazing band for years and years. And
I guess they kind of
doing what they do.
A large part of when they would come through town was like the frat crowd. Of course, they played tons of school stuff. I don't remember a lot about their music, honestly. Like I saw them, and I think one of my friends' bands opened for them, and so by the time they were playing, I was just lit and don't remember a lot at all.
I think they was been about a few months ago. Last time they were at Government Street.
They actually the band that opened for them was called Wrong, RONG, and it was my buddy Chris Wilkie and a guy named Rogan Marshall and some other, and it was just a big sludgy punk band, like just grindingly slow and completely like unhinged punk band. They were opening for Dash, and as the finale, they poured whiskey on Rogan and Christopher poured whiskey on each other and dropped to the floor, completely making out. And Chris was in a dress. And this was in front.
Where was
this? Tal's Dart Bar in Hattiesburg, which was awesome.
Was this a band out of New Orleans, or it was?
No, they were from Hattiesburg. Those were my friends, and and Dash, was up after them. So the whole place was full of frat guys, just baseball hats from hither and yon, and I was so sure that something weird was going to jump off, and that I would have to scramble out of the room because my buddy and this guy fell down making out in front of just what was essentially a big frat row, but everything stayed. Maybe they were scared of Tal. Tal was a very imposing fella. He was good, solid, 5.5 foot wide, buff up there, and then had these little tiny stick legs. And so, and if any trouble started, he was liable to snap your neck. He was like some special forces.
New Orleans had a great punk rock scene. A lot of people don't, they think the punk rock, they don't think New Orleans, but it's got got websites devoted to that. But there's some of these bands. I mean, I remember going back to New York. And you can probably Chicago. There's some colorful characters out there that sometimes it's not always music. It's more
gimmicks, and stuff like that.
The Quintron in New Orleans. You ever heard that stuff? Miss Pussycat, oh God, I can't believe I'm fucking that up. But Quintron, that stuff's amazing. And the Morning 40 people, I thought I was moving to New Orleans when I came down, and the people I knew there knew a lot of those folks. And actually, Quintron was instrumental, I believe, if I understand the story correctly. And they built an entire musical house in New Orleans. That almost every part of it could be played in some way. Like the stairs were set to different sizes so that they were almost pitched and you could hit them with things. And then they had the plumbing was a water organ. And then there were big percussion instruments, and all. So this whole house was strung together out of all sorts of things that were playable. And then they invited everybody out, played and I believe Quintron conducted or something like that. I may have that wrong, but he conducted everybody, and they played some enormous piece on this house, and then tore the whole thing down.
What?
After they somewhere, I believe there's some video of it, but essentially it was just a happening. They went out, they played the house, and then afterwards they stripped most of it off there. I think now
That's interesting.
I think now they've actually rebuilt it somewhat to be a more permanent fixture. But
where was this at? You said
New Orleans.
We were in
let me get you another water, Ed. Go ahead. You can keep going.
Okay. Recently, we were a couple of nights. We did a couple shows there. We went down to New Orleans, and at a venue there. I think the venue actually closed now, or is in the middle of changing over or something. But the first night was a band called Larkin Poe that we were big fan of, and Emily Kopp opened for them, and it was a good show. And it was on probably the rainiest night of the year. Well, the following night we went back down there, me and Andy, and to see Lincoln Durham. And this is somebody you really need to check out too. I wrote a recent article this month on Lincoln Durham.
We will need to exchange lists.
He's talking about a one-man show. He's a remarkable. But the point I was going to make, the guy that opened for him, I can't even remember his name. He was walking around in his suit, and his hair was a certain way, and he was just kind of real quiet before the show. And I was thinking I was going to go up and speak to him like I normally do with people, and I'm so glad I didn't. So he got up there and he just broke into song, and it was literally. I'm so glad. The night before, talking about Emily, her parents went to the first show with Larkin Poe, and it was a great night, and it was a good show and everything. I'm so glad they weren't there the second night, because that was the most obscene. It was like every song was so gimmicky, but yet, I mean, it was obviously, it was all about, shock, but it really wasn't shocking. It was almost, I hate to say it was just kind of pathetic, but that was an interesting opening act that Robbie actually painted the guy, and I'm good. I'm not saying he probably is from New Orleans. Who knows? He might be from Biloxi. Who knows?
Yeah.
I'll wind up, he's going to be outside waiting on me when I'm through here.
Yeah, he's from my garage.
Yeah, maybe. He
lives in my trash can.
But this guy, it definitely was interesting, and not interesting in a good way. But we left it. Getting back, Robbie painted that, and he said, I don't know if this will ever sell. Anybody going to buy that. But Robbie will never get rid of anything, so who knows? It might be one day worth something.
On my list, and I'll definitely get you this, there's a guy that was playing New Orleans for a long time. Might be the best live show I've ever seen, named James Hall. He's James Hall and Pleasure Club later on, but it was initially James Hall. They came to Hattiesburg, played Tao's Dart Bar, the place I'm talking about, with little stick leg Tao. And he came in there and played for 20 people. And this is what I've talked to you about as far as short sets. He came, played for 20 people, played maybe nudging on 30 minutes, maybe. And absolutely killed us. And came out there, that was probably less than 20 people. I'm saying nudging on 15, enough that I could just wander around, walk up the stage, walk back. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't a halfway show. He was sweating. He dances like James Brown. At least back then he did. He's an older man now. Dance like James Brown. He'll go from hollering like an absolute punk, just complete like adenoidal, red-faced hollering, and then bust into complete soul man like falsetto shit. And he just got signed to Geffen at the time, his very first. And that might be the most effective rock show I've ever seen. As far as something that is loud and sexual and awesome, he was it. Like I've never seen anybody that approached that. Like there's other things on a softer level, like people that I've seen that have played more like intimate things, that it's just a different realm. And I've seen some amazing things on that front, but on rock and roll level, that dude was it. I'm not sure he's doing the same. He might have just blown the upper part of his range out, because he was always just purple faced.
What time period was this when he was?
I think when he got signed, I don't know. Pleasure Club might have been the somewhere right 90s somewhere. Pretty sure. But he kept going. He had 2 Pleasure Club albums, which were after that. But that's one of the most amazing live performers I've ever seen.
So total opposite of what this guy down here I saw. There.
Yeah.
If he'd have put that energy in a good way, it might
was
have been good.
confrontational. Like he had that whole strutting around, sort of catty Mick Jagger, like "screw you, you want me" sort of stage presence. Mm-hmm. And which in bigger crowds, he absolutely turns that to 11. He'll just go.
That passion that some people have. You don't always have to be the best musician and the greatest talent. It's just that they got that raw energy. It can be the most entertaining show you ever go to.
Conviction, believe it. Make the people believe it.
Yeah, that's kind of like the like bands like the Ramones and stuff. That real quick pace stuff, and I say they weren't talented. They were talented guys, but I mean it was just that raw energy, passion that they offered people like that. It's always been
when I was in college, a lot of what people were into was the really noisy, Jesus Lizard type sort of hit and scream things. And at the time, I was convinced I wanted to do something else more musical and kind of soul influenced and all this other stuff. And I kind of missed my chance. Like I wish to hell. Like nowadays, I love an amazing fuzz pedal, and I love to get on the guitar and just be loud as hell. And I'm in my younger years, I skipped all that to try to be really musical and really like whatever. And I skipped my chance to be in a punk band. Like I wish the hell I would have been in one of these punk bands.
I hope I heard you. I've heard you perform a little bit from the other night. That instrument, we talked about the other night, the Hooter. The Melodica. Yeah. I always think of the band, the Hooters. They were a great Philadelphia band. I love you can inculcate that into your music. I think that's an interesting addition. Not everybody uses that,
Yeah, I've got a couple of them. I've thought about hooking them up to like an air tube, playing them like an organ, having them
that would be
double manual.
I would like to see that.
You were talking about a washboard earlier.
Yeah.
And just when you said that, it just popped into my head. I was like, I wonder if I could ever rig that to a distortion pedal somehow, make an electric washboard, rig it to a distortion pedal.
You just need
and just do something weird,
mic.
A wah pedal or an octave pedal.
Sure you can.
Get crazy with it.
I've got the mics you could do it with. You get a little contact mic and piezo. You stick it to the thing. Absolutely. I've got when I was touring, I ended up not using it, but I built a wooden box that was festooned with springs and chains, and I had a knob that would turn and make a clicky noise and all this other stuff, and then I had contact mics on the side of it, and so you could scrape it and turn it and do it and pluck those springs, and it just makes this enormous Tom Waitsy like noise. And that's absolutely. You stick a contact mic to it, and near about anything, like all sorts of small things. At one point I had a hinge that I buried for half a week till it got good and creaky, and I just stapled that down to it, and I could sit there and creak it, and it makes these awesome noises. And my idea had been at the time that rather than having like a drum machine or looping like a guitar thing to play along with, I would do this this junky sounding loop and then play along with that. But all the places I played when I actually went touring, I had to set up and be done so quick. I would just go up there with guitar, and so that kind of fell by the wayside. But I still have the machine.
I think open mic night or jam session at Ben's would be a good time to break it out.
I should break that out.
I would love there. Just let me know. I'll be right up front row there.
I'll bring that. I'll bring it tomorrow night. I'll almost guarantee you. There's Will. But
redirecting him through the door. This is a nice thing. I enjoy discussing this kind of stuff. I like to be able to discuss in a free flow type of conversation.
I want to be involved. If you bring his buddy that was talking about the sort of garage bands here on the coast, I want to be involved in that one because I want to hear that. That's something that intrigues me. Like to be sort of stranded in the middle of Mississippi as like a little musician and to try to be in a psychedelic garage band when everything around you is church and fishing. I'd be interested to hear that.
Don't cut it short down here too much. I mean, it's really. I think there is some very interesting stuff that can be done, and you know, if you put those kind of things to good use.
Oh well, I'm definitely at the time is kind of what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Like I'm definitely thinking '60s Mississippi. I don't doubt that I could find down here it's definitely flourishing art wise and all that other thing. So it's less about what happens down here or Mississippi as an entity as the South in the '60s.
Turn you on.
I actually saw this guy play here the other night too. He was at the Irish Coast Pub. Yeah.
Hey guys, what's going on?
How you doing?
I don't think I've gotten to meet you yet.
I'm Johnny.
Will,
Johnny.
nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Good to see you, Eddie. Good to see you, Stefan.
Thank you.
So we're all here now.
We're all here. It's official.
You've missed out a
He
whole
might be the
lot
only
of
person
conversation.
that's actually
I'm sure I have.
kind of on stage the entire time because there's never a
You
replacement.
actually,
there's not a bassist.
You're right. He's on.
There's another.
How's
fellow
your
that
back
plays bass
doing or your legs?
What, me? Usually does pretty good. I mean, I'm only 24, so I mean, if I'm not up there, when I'm up there, if I kind of hang out for a bit, and then once I get warm, I'm like, all right, time to get up, and then every time there's something going on, I'm running back up there.
Now, do you perform in a band too, or
I've been working on getting one together. I'm a jammer. So I have guys that I've jammed with for a while. I've kind of been back home here since about a year and a half now, and I've got guys I've been jamming with pretty consistently, and so it's just making that step to be the ringleader and the director and saying like, okay, we're gonna be a band now. Like, okay, put all your qualms on the table. Let's suck it up and be a band because
Put your children in a daycare.
Yeah.
Kiss your wife goodbye.
Get your cell phone working. That's one of my. I don't know. I could definitely get on my soapbox about all the little things, all the little minutia that musicians do. Like, oh man, we can't make it. We can't get up today.
I think Stefan has the right idea. Like it's, even though I definitely love playing with a full band, but if you can strip it down to a couple elements, it's so much easier.
Yeah. When I show up to practice, I only know there's one other person that can fuck up.
yes.
Yeah.
Which.
Two of my last bands that I had in Chicago before I came down, one of them was 11-piece. I had 3 backup singers, 2 keyboard players.
How
guitar,
does anybody
bass,
profit?
Drums. Profit? What strange
Put that
language are you
$200
talking?
This
Profit.
isn't a business here.
Yeah.
Well, when you
I
want
had
to eat.
11 people. I decided I'd done this really built up, sort of overdubbed, very lush album, and I decided I didn't want to leave anything out. I didn't want to leave it behind. So I had these 3 great backup singers, and then the 2 keyboard players, and one of them's actually they're both good piano players. One of them came from more of a traditional piano playing background, and they would individually play all these orchestrated parts that I had, and I loved having a show where there was 11 people on stage. But yeah, as far as like wrangling it, getting it done, no, I don't want to ever do that again.
I'd hate to be the sound guy. Trying to think.
I mean, but I bet it was a party on stage.
Well, sound guys are grumpy if you show up with 3 people. So I don't know that you're going to make them any more. The sound guys, like, just tuck your ponytail in. There's and you'll be fine.
The guy over at Callahan's in Mobile. I still haven't met this guy and talked to him personally, but he's always there. He and there's there's a small area, and there'll be a big band, 7 people, whatever, 6 people, and he just puts it together. He's just I don't know how he does. He does a great job. It always sounds good. It's none of this.
Well, the people that the great ones. I mean, there are things you could do that definitely piss off a sound guy, like the too much stage volume. Like if you're just really all about your stage volume, you need to have, on bass. Like sound guys hate it if they hear your strings pop. If you're really digging in, they hate that stuff. But in general, the really good ones, they'll go up there and it's done within a couple minutes, and it'll always just sound great.
Jason's doing a great, open mic night. That's
it sounds awesome.
He's doing extremely good. He's I think he reworked a lot of the sound there for being. And it's
I think a large reason that sound guys end up with that crazy dazed 1,000-yard stare is because you're just listening to so much stuff all the time. And even if some of it's decent, you're bound to get just worn down. And like everybody that comes in there thinks that, rarely has a front person of a band ever thought that or ever been super humble. Like there's at least some part of you that thinks that you're some kind of shit. Like, oh yeah, but those were those bands. What about me though? Like, let's take care of me. Mm-hmm. And so I imagine as a sound person, that would eventually like just slowly grind your brain down. But like I said, that's what the ponytail's for.
But there's nothing worse than if you go to a place and the sound is just horrible, and it can make a good band just seem like, ugh.
Yeah.
When the band does well, it's the band's. That's because of the band. When they sound bad, it's because of the sound guy.
Yeah.
Or the producer, if you're in the studio, as the saying goes.
Well, the struggle we talk about, that the conversation that always comes up is that a lot of the venues down here, the rooms are so hard to tune. I mean, Irish Coast is a really great example because they have the tile floor and then drywall and the stage, and it's glass windows right behind the stage. And like I stand on the stage, like if anybody ever like has seen us play up there. Like, I stand off the stage and I'm standing like 5 feet away from that amplifier and still have a really hard time hearing it. So, like, last week we tried it. Like, yeah, Jason's been doing a good job mixing. But I'm still working on making the bass amp work for me. And it sits right next to the drums. So, like, if you get a drummer up there who, really lays into it, I lose it. And so, I had it coming from, like, both ears at one point. So I had my bass amp behind me, and then a monitor like pushing back bass so that I could hear something. So, but that's not. I mean, the Quarter was like that, and they just closed. But a lot of these venues down here have that problem.
It's pretty much that way at most places.
I played in an overhead walkway in Chicago that would go over the Textile Center or whatever in downtown Chicago, and it was a reggae band I played in as a money gig.
A reggae band, you have got around.
And we sat up in this place, and the dimensions of this, it had a circular top, or not a circular, a tube top. And where we had set up, we basically created a standing wave with the band, so that the bass length or the wavelength was such that if you walked out a little bit from the band, the volume decreased markedly. So I could walk out like maybe 3 or 4 feet from where I was, and of course abandoning my post as a keyboard player, and walk out, and it would almost go away. It felt like your ears were super plugged up. Mm-hmm. It was an amazing thing, but basically we were facing this wall, and it was just the right length that it created just one huge wave in the middle there, and if you went to the trough, of where all that stuff was meeting, you could make all of it almost disappear. It was amazing. I thought it blew my brain. Onward and forward.
That's cool.
I enjoyed that.
Science.
Yeah, it's like like with the Whispering Galleries. So Whispering Galleries is like the thing they have in the Mormon Tabernacle Choir, or the Mormon Tabernacle, and in the National Statuary Hall, which was the unicameral legislature before they switched it to bicameral legislature. So it's like the acoustics work to where it's the same idea from the Greek amphitheaters. Yeah. So somebody's standing in the middle, and you can hear them all around. In the Greek amphitheaters, it's somebody stands in the middle, and you can drop a penny in the center of it, and you can hear it at every single point in the amphitheater. But so the Whispering Gallery is where we can stand on one side of this circular building, and whisper something, and they can hear it on the opposite side. Perfect. Oh. So in the Mormon Tabernacle, you stand at the figure point, where the pastor stands, and it resonates throughout the entire place. But because of the way the acoustics are designed. There's
a building that's attached to the Tower of Pisa that does the same thing. It's a smaller room, it's a tiny room, but it's the same thing where if you get at the sweet spot, it you can hum and it'll start almost feeding back.
Yeah, resonating.
Resonating heavy duty.
Yeah, it's like the Pantheon in Rome too. Yeah. They have that same phenomenon because it's got the oculus in the center. It's all designed on that, round. I don't know. I'm not a physicist, so
you're already talking over my head.
Yeah. But yeah.
So we've been talking mostly about the local scene, music, art, and all this kind of stuff. This documentary that you and your buddies are working on, is it anything related that goes with the theme of the show?
Right. So I missed the official theme. We texted a little bit about it and spoke a little bit about it, but can you hit it to me one more time?
Just music, art, the local scene.
Right. So I think it's definitely cut from the same cloth. I think it really embodies the same. Sorry, I'm squirming around in my chair. I can't get comfortable. It's definitely cut from the same cloth, and it definitely embodies that same spirit. So we're doing a documentary on the Pass Parade. We were actually shooting today. And I think we're going to wrap with what we've done today.
On the Pass Parade? Is that what you said?
Yeah.
Okay.
So they do the annual Pass Christian Mardi Gras Parade.
Yep.
And we shot day of. We did a little bit of work before. But it's primarily going to be a day of parade kind of thing. It's not going to be a broad scope documentary on like 10 subjects. No. We'll have one main subject in there who's a local, who's kind of taking us around and stuff. I think it'll be really cool. We've got some really incredible footage. But yeah, I think I've gotten linked into it's funny because I've been a musician I'm a bass player, so I'm not a real musician. So I've played bass since I was about 15 and have kind of almost made larger strides recently to get into film than I have to get into music. So since Monday Night Band has really been popping up, I'm like, well, let's start a band too, so that we can, since I actually kind of know what I'm doing with that.
Before you drift all the way away, it was sent by God.
Yeah.
The Monday night was sent by God.
Yeah.
To keep you from not being a musician.
Oh, Monday Night Band is is still my favorite thing in life.
Is that what you're now calling is the Monday Night Band?
Oh yeah. We have a Facebook group, plug. So
it really is.
Yeah.
I didn't even know that. Here I'm supposed to be knowing this kind of stuff.
There you go.
Is Diggs Darcy easy over the
Diggs is the.
I think it's his birthday today.
It is Diggs' birthday. He's going
Happy
to
birthday,
see
Diggs.
He's going to see Helmet in Mobile.
Yeah, that's okay.
Diggs is the band leader. But it's so plug. It's an open jam. Come on out. We have a ball. Yeah, so Jason's big goal. I think there's a lot of creative effervescence that's going on down here right now, and you've got Gandhi doing Mississippi Modern in Jackson, and Julia Reyes is doing her stuff with Crest Live. They have some really spectacular art pieces at Crest, and they've done stuff kind of on the outside of that building for the last 3 or 4 years. They've done installations and stuff like that, and had artists come out and paint on the sides of it. But Jason's conception for the Monday Night Band is to be like a local forum for coast musicians. So yeah, it's a jam session, but it's also an open mic. Mm-hmm. So go and play your tunes, and maybe you'll pick up a bass player who you really like, or maybe that one kick-ass drummer will be there, or maybe you'll decide you want to do 2 drummers.
It's definitely evolved into really something special.
When I was gone to Cincinnati, they drafted in. There was the 2 bassist and drummer that I hadn't seen ever there. Were you there then? When I was gone, it was 2 or 3 Mondays ago.
The guys that played the gospel stuff?
Yeah, just the kick-ass gospel business?
It was bass, keys, and drums.
Oh, okay.
And so those guys kind of one guy sat at the door the week before that all night, with headphones in, and everybody thought he was a bouncer or a doorman. He just kind of waved and said, hey to a few people.
I saw him there.
Yeah.
He's a player?
He's the bass player. And he just walks up and he's like, yeah, I'm going to play the next one. I'm like, okay, go for it. And he was phenomenal.
Yeah, they sounded. I saw a little clip of video,
and
gospel players.
Those guys play in church together all the time. I can tell you right now. I've been to a gospel service and have tried to sit in with that kind of stuff, and it is it's some of the most unbelievable music. I had the privilege of going to a church in Biloxi and learn a little bit about it with them there, and it was just unbelievable.
In early 2000s in Chicago, a bunch of different bars would have, acid jazz bands play, and it'd basically just be a big pile up on stage of everybody that could play anything. But it was all these guys from the gospel groups and stuff. So
right.
And I never even figured out a lot of these people's names, but Elbow Room used to have Paul Mertens playing sax, who now plays for Brian Wilson. He's
wow.
does all his horn arrangements and shit. And then I believe one of these Chicago gospel, the guitar player played on D'Angelo's first album.
Wow.
So it was just the sickest players, and they were all from that gospel scene. Other than Scott, the drummer, later played with like Filter and some of these other bands, but he was just an amazing, like, you could go, and now, like, I never want to hear an acid jazz album. I don't want to hear anybody singing over this big funk band. I don't want to hear that album, but to go there and watch these people play, that was amazing. And that was all gospel people.
We've covered all from gospel to punk rock to some real crappy music to the blues. It's been a pretty interesting discussion so far.
We even talked about Bob Log III. You know about?
Oh yeah, I know Bob Log. Yeah, I was in.
Speaking of which, he's from Arizona. That's where I found out.
You checked it out. You give him a call and talk to him a little bit there while we. I know you.
I wonder if you called him if he would answer on his helmet phone.
Yeah, there's a helmet telephone. Yeah. I was backpacking in northern Spain a couple summers ago, and there was somebody on the sidewalk selling like professional photographs of musicians and stuff like that, and they had a fucking picture of Bob Log III.
Oh my god,
€300 that they had taken.
So it's on your wall now?
No. That was like a third of my budget for that month-long trip.
I had a roommate in Chicago that swung through for. He didn't last long. He was a sweetheart of a guy. I didn't know that. I think he was actually bipolar, and but when he first came in, he was doing that. He had a snare on his left foot and a bass drum on the other foot, both of them with pedals, and just wrote these songs. Had a little Telecaster. Go play both of those. Awesome, And right at the point where I wonder why this guy doesn't get further along. He seemed like he had his shit together. He's writing great songs and everything else, and then he, I believe, kind of went off meds or something. Shows up with like he was like in his 30s. Shows up with a 19-year-old, and they're gonna move to L.A. Like that was after like hanging out for a week.
Slam dunk.
They gobbled a bunch of Ritalin and showed up telling me how awesome life was, and then, hey, I'm moving to L.A. by the way. So the answer of like, I wonder why this guy hasn't gone further. So he probably every so often just completely blows the fuck up and runs off.
Yeah, I think that goes back to what we were talking about earlier, just the players in the scene, musicians and artists in general. I mean, creativity comes from weird places generally. Yeah. So, and sometimes that manifests itself.
Basically, are we going to consider ourselves creative? Because we all kind of a little bit.
I never want to be like. I like the level of skills I have because I get to not be crazy. I don't have to like. Go drive off a bridge or get in a standoff with the cops or like Skip Spence from Moby Grape or whatever going after the singer with an axe in the studio. Like, let's just stay under there. Or like the Brian Wilson, like, I've lost my mind and I'm seeing Twinkies. Like, under that level. Whatever that level of being really good, but you don't have to be out of your damn mind.
Yeah,
that's where I want to sit.
And without the gimmicks too. I think that's one thing that I've always tried to aspire to is just like gimmicky things, which we've talked about a couple of them here, just sitting around talking. But just to make sure the music is the actual forefront. Like, don't try to make this big display of all the. I mean, it's great to have people come out and have a good time and all this kind of stuff. And like sometimes I think like bands like the Flaming Lips and stuff like that, which like I've seen them before a couple times and all this.
Pump your brakes.
And they go.
Pump your brakes.
What?
What you think? You think Flaming Lips? Think Flaming Lips are gimmicky?
Well, what I'm saying is they have they're very theatrical in a lot of ways. Yeah. And I mean,
they like keep in mind they had
that was a great show last week though.
They got their bones. They earned their bones as a full-fledged, crazy good band,
right?
Like rock and roll band. Before they ever did the playing along to a tape, teddy bears dancing.
I like the fact that they marched their own tune. They've always done it. And
I would if he starts a cult, I'm there. Like he's almost.
So he's very
now you're knocking Flaming Lips.
I'm not knocking.
Oh, okay. I'm not knocking. Rush has been talked about. We obviously
who's that?
Rush. We talked about Rush a little bit there.
And I think what you're talking about, like. Sort of exists in a more like I would almost see that as you. I think it is the guy that you saw that freaked you the hell out and he was just kind of bad and whatever. Like at a certain point, that might be kind of a palate cleanser and it's sort of like if it's done purposely, it might just edge into more of a performance art sort of place where like just make people as uncomfortable as possible. Not necessarily. I don't want to. I'm old. I don't necessarily want to go out and see that stuff, but I do like the idea that you would go somewhere and something breaks out of the mold a little bit as far as like audience, performer, sit there, have your drink, watch the music. Like when things are a little bit confrontational, I booked when I in Tower Records in Chicago. I used to book the local music. I'd also handled all the consignments, and that's why I think I understand Soundman, because I used to hear all this music, and everybody that brought you music thought that they were taking over the world, and it just slowly sort of made me. I hate life. Just all these people's like wishes and hopes coming at you, and then you having to give their CD back to them and whatever. But I booked a guy named Marvin Tate, who in Chicago is just legit. Like he's another one that I feel like when I got near him, I got near genius. He's an artist, spoken word guy, all this other stuff. He had a great band, sort of a funkadelic collective, who every one of them was amazing. Like all the singers were amazing. They had 3 different singers, and they would just go up and they'd have these huge sprawling shows. And I booked them at Tower because I love their album. I'd never seen their live show. And then I had to leave and go play my own show somewhere. And when I told somebody that I'd booked Marvin Tate and the D Settlement at Tower Records, they're like, seriously? Well, what? Have you ever seen their show? No, I've never. Apparently, one of them showed up in assless chaps, on stage, and people were in various states of undress, and Marvin at one point had a wireless mic and went chasing after some woman that was getting in the elevator. Where you going, white lady? And so from then on, I no longer had free reign on booking anybody, because I had to go and talk to the boss, and he was like, you know what, run it by me before you book anybody from here on out.
What was kind of neat about CBGB back in the day was what I always thought was that the other night we talked about that guy. I wish I could think of his name. Maybe I shouldn't remember his name. But
the horrible guy.
The horrible guy. One thing I told Robbie that night when he was painting, he painted that guy, and the performance. I said, it kind of reminded me of CBGB, and Robbie said, I don't get that. I said, well, you don't quite understand. I was there at CBGB. I kind of remember this. And what I meant by that is you never knew what to expect. You'd have this extremely great band, and the next thing would be some of a performance art type thing. Yeah. And it would be crap, but it was something about it that actually added to the show. And maybe that's why when Lincoln Durham had booked this guy to be his opening act, because he's such a unique, great artist, this guy before me was such a contrast, but yet it was, I guess in some weird way, it was kind of interesting. But I mean, the best I can say. But that was what's great about CBGB. Southwest, when you go out to Southwest, South by Southwest. When you go that later this month, we're going. It's so many bands. There's so many bands from all over the world that show up there. I mean, we're talking 1,000 bands, So you never know what you're going to see. It's going to be something extremely good, or they're mostly going to be somebody's interested in them, or they wouldn't be booked there, or they wouldn't get booked. But you never know who you're going to find out. We found out about Lincoln Durham last year, and he's been around a little bit, but we went to a show there, and then this guy, and it was like, my God, he's so good. And then we heard we ever come to New Orleans or somewhere close, we were going to, or drive wherever we'd drive to see him. And we were lucky enough to see him in New Orleans.
I want to hit Austin, but
come along. Come on next week.
Well, no, completely. Those crowds, I'd be up they would have a repeat of the Shooter in the Tower.
Oh, okay.
I can't be around that many people, but you can still see pockmarks of the actual bullets.
Really?
Or I say that. I went to go pick up a friend when I was back in college, and they were still there. I don't know what they're doing now. It may not be. But he took me somewhere and was like, yeah, those are the bullet holes from the thing.
Austin's a great scene, even when you're not Southwest.
Well, that's exactly. I would like to go when it's not that, because I know there's a lot of just local people that are doing amazing stuff. And one of my favorite Chicago things was at I think she originally came from Dallas. It was called Bone and Bell, and she's out in Portland now. Mm-hmm. But
another good music scene is Portland. Yeah.
Yeah. And apparently they have amazing carpet at the airport.
They have carpet
at the airport.
Some amazing. Well, they've recently replaced it, but it became sort of iconic to the point that they were making T-shirts and socks that had the design, because people were taking selfies of their feet when they would come into the airport, because it was such a weird, iconic carpet for this place.
Yeah.
And it was supposed to look like the radar that the air controllers are looking at.
Yeah.
So
Someone
there
had
was
some
a
really
sweeping
grand
line
idea.
and some zip, and it was some horrid green color, but people got attached to it. Now they'd recently replaced it. Everybody's like up in arms because it was an institution. A guy actually started a business specifically to sell socks that were made in that pattern.
That's new to me.
I want to bring it back to the performance and the music and all that. I think that having a more theatrical, even a really theatrical stage performance to go as a companion to the music can be really compelling. So like Les Claypool has been on this kick with Primus and the Chocolate Factory. So we saw them when they came to Biloxi a few weeks ago, or no, hell, it was a couple months ago. Mm-hmm. And I was waiting for the moment when he was going to drive the Wonka wash machine onto the stage, and he was going to bring the boat out on the stage.
Wait, now explain what.
Okay,
Primus is touring with more musicians that are added to the band.
They've been touring for the most recent record they put out in November is called Primus and the Chocolate Factory.
Oh, okay.
And it's a song-for-song cover record of the 70s Gene Wilder Wonka film.
Yeah.
Of the
Awesome.
soundtrack. Mm-hmm. And the music is, I'm a Primus fan, so...
Me too.
You either love them or you hate them. I think they're unbelievable musicians. And after seeing them live, it's I understand it more and I appreciate it even more so. At times, it's kind of like, we dare you to listen to this. And at times, it's like, we dare you to play this on the radio. And it can almost be kind of alienating, like to listen to an entire Primus record. Sometimes it's like, oh my God, like please, like put on the Beatles or something. Like I can't make it through this. But to see it live makes you appreciate it a different way. But so they did this whole Primus and the Chocolate Factory record, and Les talked about how Gene Wilder as Willy Wonka was one of his most original inspirations in life. And when you look at it, like, damn, like it makes so much sense because he's, like he's like the bass playing ringmaster of the Primus circus,
absolutely.
But so it was all kind of it was in music circles and in Primus fan circles there were all these kind of like, what's it gonna be like? What's it gonna be like? And I kept saying, I'm waiting for the moment when he brings the Wonka boat out on stage. Is it raining? And they do all that. But it was a really elaborate stage setup, and that was it. He came out there in Willy Wonka dress, in a Willy Wonka, in like an orange wig. But that was about. I mean, the setup was pretty elaborate, but that was it. And they did the Oompa Loompa, and they had a couple Oompa Loompas with enormous, like larger than life.
I want to
stadium character heads go out there and just do
Oompa Loompas phone calls to their parents. They're like, "Yeah, I got a gig. I'm gonna be touring. No, I'm gonna be touring." I'm like, well, what are you playing? What are you doing? I'm walking out. I'm painted green, or no, orange. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'm be mostly bending at the knees.
Yeah, bending at the knees. I'll sort of, walk like
I'll
a
be paid
penguin.
in chocolate.
That's amazing.
I can't quite picture, Lennon or McCartney or somebody like that having,
yeah, and so I really
the E Street Band just comes out the Bruce and they have it just doesn't quite get it,
I really I loved the show and I really liked the setup, but to me it's and parts of the music parts of the Chocolate Factory stuff was unbelievable. If you're a fan, the Veruca Salt song live was out of this world. Great. Oh my gosh. But to me it almost kind of missed the mark. But it drives home the point that it's not about all that other stuff. That's like it's a backdrop and it's about this music.
Yeah.
And it's cool with Primus because.
But you would have liked to have seen it tip more into actual performance.
To not just enough to push the drama of the music. I mean, I'm a Blue Man Group fan, so you're talking about somebody who's gimmicky.
Yeah.
They're gimmicky. I love them though. I don't care.
I think that's their thing though. They are.
They are, but the music is. I think the music's great. And they've released a couple studio albums of just the music.
Well, like, if you're talking about a performance with the music, it's like I brought the E Street Band. I'm an enormous Bruce Springsteen fan. And the E Street Band, everybody says, oh, Bruce Springsteen, E Street, he's, how old is he now? But if you'd ever seen the E Street Band perform live, have you guys ever seen them live?
No, never.
I watched that.
It's an amazing show. And it's the performance, even though it's no gimmicks, it's strictly music, but yet Bruce and the band brings such a performance element to it. It's almost like a rock and roll revival. It's
Yeah.
talking
No, it's
about
absolutely-
gospel.
that's-
It's got something gospel about
Yeah,
it. It's
definitely.
an amazing thing. And a lot of those great bands, the Stones and different ones,
Yeah.
are able to do that. Even to this, they're old guys, but they can still do it. It's so I understand what you're saying there.
Yeah.
I definitely got when it was when it got into real flannelly territory in the 90s and it became more of a actually not even the 90s. There was the shoegazy stuff that was happening before, or just I understand not everybody can be a front person in that thing, but I'm always a little bit disappointed if somebody's in front of a band and they're looking at the shoes and seem like they could be anywhere else and it wouldn't really matter. Like some of my favorite stuff is when you're actually connecting, on that. Not to say that, like, if you're an introvert but you write great music, yeah, come up on stage and you can stare at your shoes. It's fine, But me personally, most of my favorite stuff that I've seen is when there's like that little electric zap that happens. I saw, speaking of old, like I mentioned earlier, that I've seen some amazing quiet shows.
Mm-hmm.
James Hall, best loud show I've seen, but I saw Rickie Lee Jones in Chicago.
Oh wow!
When on that last album where she's doing all the covers,
Mm-hmm.
and comes out looking just like 45 miles of bad road, and
I believe she lives in New Orleans now. If I'm not mistaken.
she's in New Orleans working on an album,
what it
and I
is?
think living here while she's doing that. I actually I tried to contact somebody and offer myself up. However that's going to work, but she came out and. The first couple minutes, like she's trying to make sure nobody can see up her skirt because she's sitting on the stage, so she had to turn this way, turn that, and so it all was like your crazy head grandmother that used to be a hippie or whatever, but she launched into like, and I can't even remember what the first song was. I think it might have been the Pleased to Meet You. Hope you guessed my name.
Yeah.
Why am I blanking on that?
Sympathy for the Devil.
Sympathy for the Devil. And who can do that song? Who can cover that song? Like how the hell do you? She did, and she sounded more menacing than a dozen Mick Jaggers stacked up.
Yeah.
And then she does like Vic Chestnut song called "His Jeweled Floor." And if you saw her live, I know he did that. She starts off with the drone, with the cello player, and all this other stuff. But that song, well, it's a heartbreaking song anyway. Not the smallest amount, which is that Vic Chestnut's gone, so it makes it hurts even more. But she did that song, "His Jeweled Floor" by Vic Chestnut, and I, grown ass man, teared up, losing my mind. It was that fucking good.
I was waiting for you to bring up some name I said, like trying to listen to, and you bring up her. That's fitting. I mean, we saw recently at this past year at Doolin Hall in Jackson. Great place to go to. It was the first time I ever played Mississippi anywhere. But Steven's an extremely big fan of hers, and but you're right. That is one of the most best shows I've seen.
She doesn't go halfway.
She
closes her eyes and it's all she's entirely.
It works. You're talking about looking at your shoes, and sometimes it depends on the song, the artist, and how I can do it. And she's takes that intimate moment and just turns it into something very special.
And she can seem very inward on stage. Like a lot of times she'll close her eyes and just be, but she's just getting to a place.
But it pulls you in.
It brings you in with it. Yeah. Like I saw, like that was definitely the high point. It might actually edge out my other favorite, Joe Henry. I saw him at the American Music Hall in San Francisco.
Oh,
and he played with a really small group of folks. And that was some of the most intense, especially nowadays, that when I'm singing, I can't sing like I used to yell a lot, and I can't do that anymore. I just wrecked my voice.
Yeah.
So I love bringing it down, but it's hard to stay intense. And that band that he had together, Jay Bellarose, Patrick Warren playing keys, and David Pilch on bass, they never rose above a certain level. And when a song got through, it felt like you had just rocked your head off for like 3 minutes. Like they were intense and quiet. And that was also like,
you ever heard Judith Owen?
Nope.
Okay, she's
That's
actually
going to go on the list.
She's married to the comedian Harry Shearer, from Simpsons and
so New
all
Orleans?
that. Yeah. She performed a show at the place down there in New Orleans. Slips of mine. One of these many good venues. But she played with Leland Sklar, who's an amazing. I'm talking about the long beard, the
Phil Collins' old bass.
Right, and he's played with James Taylor and all. He's just one of the premier, sidemen ever. Yeah. But he played with that night, and it was one of those really just great shows, and it was a perfect evening. Sometimes everything comes together perfect. If the weather's rainy out there, a show like that, it's just perfect. It's like, and that night it was a storming night in New Orleans, and this quite little dark venue, and it was just perfect for that kind of stuff. And with Leland on his bass, and as like I say, sometimes and all that element can be just as good and just as powerful as all that theatrics. Mm-hmm. But like I said, I appreciate being able to sit here and talk to us about this because, we get back to the scene here, the music scene, and, we got to do our part in supporting, we talk about Ben Kaufman's and the Monday night thing, which is a great thing going, and it's evolved into something. I hope it continues in that right direction.
Yeah, I did too.
But I think we as people, we just as fans of music in this area, it's very up to us to try to promote and support. Get these people to support these venues, and especially when they're ones that are doing something like what Ben's doing, or like I mentioned, that Mark Garrison's doing over in Pascagoula at Jack's by the Tracks. Is go there and support these artists and these venues and be there to listen, and
to hold them, to touch the people.
Oh, well, yeah.
And there's
because you're musicians, you might be saying it because you guys are musicians.
I like to be held.
You like to be held? Okay, well.
No, Eddie Dixon likes
Jason,
to be held.
yeah, absolutely.
Oh, talking about Jason, he's a hugger.
Jason's a hugger.
He's a big hugger.
That man can hug.
When I first met Jason, I was one of those people kind of use side hugs. Now I'm getting to where I hug people. I'm like, well, I guess this is kind of addicting,
Yeah, and the cool thing is, though, there's some people who are doing original music that are doing really interesting stuff, and
we were discussing that earlier.
Yeah, you need to have the audience. You need to have that draw, and it's it's really cool opportunity. I mean, the grocery gets some really incredible stuff. I saw a bit, and these guys were from New Orleans. They were called the Dirty Bourbon River Show.
Yeah,
and it's like a second line funk circus rock band. It's unbelievable, and
they're getting some good stuff there.
It's a blast, and they've got.
I don't think I've ever seen an actual show at the
grocery. I think the grocery acoustically is one of the best setups. The one that's the untapped, El Dorado is Voodoo Cantina, which is the best bar on the Gulf Coast that nobody ever goes to. It's it's in downtown Biloxi. It's across the street from Ventures. Mm-hmm. It's right next door to the Half Shell. It's right behind the Half Shell. So there's a Japanese restaurant downstairs, and upstairs is Voodoo Cantina. But they have a stage in the corner, and it goes out. Mm-hmm. So it's set up perfectly acoustically. And I would really like to go see local stuff happening there. But we have a lot of we have a handful of creative local bands that are popping up.
It's been that way for the last 4 or 5 years. We're really starting to see that come along, and it's really nice.
It's kind of, Rosco Bandana and all the Rosco Bandana side projects. There's probably been 5 or 6 bands that have come out of that one. Jackson Weldon is doing the one-man band now, and they even had, White Horse and all these.
Well, they all have been very good projects. I'm good, like I said, good friends of mine, and it's been. I like the fact that they've actually tried different things,
I
different
do too.
elements,
I think that's the creative process,
Mm-hmm. Right.
You do something, and the cool thing is Jason's like, dude, everybody thinks Roscoe's done because I'm out here doing this on Monday nights. He's like, no, like, we just do all kinds of different stuff, and it's really, almost saying like it's really important. I mean, even, Josh Home from, what the hell's the name of his?
Queens
of the Stone Age. He was doing Queens of the Stone Age, and then did the Eagles of Death Metal, which I just fell into like 3 weeks ago and still listen to every once in a while. I go, oh, and like
they're so classic rock.
Oh
and like
my
the guy,
God.
the front man of that dude, I forgot what his
Josh
name
Home.
is, No. Like the guy who like took over. Josh Homme like associated himself with it and started it.
Plays drums with
Yeah.
the Eagles, but he's not singing.
No.
Okay.
It's
The main
dude.
Yeah.
It is.
Wears
it's a different
aviators. I've seen him live in New Orleans at One Eyed Jack, or what is it? I think it's One Eyed Jacks. Yeah.
singer. You saw
And,
Eagles of Death Metal?
Yeah, and I can't remember who opened for him, but there was another good band that opened. But yeah, it's just a total dance party,
Dude.
classic rock, just like.
But it's so
And
much. It's so much more than that. It's just like it's like a Rolling Stones on acid almost.
I want to live in L.A. Like
Yeah.
just one poor doggy. Oh,
Cherry
man.
Cola and gospel.
Cherry,
You're
yeah.
talking about, we really are fortunate to be between here on the coast, to be this close to New Orleans. It's a great thing. And then in Lower Alabama, I mentioned about the frog. Did I mention the frog pond earlier?
Yeah.
Or in our conversation, it's just one of those things that that this makes Mississippi the coast. We want to knock whatever, people can do that. But here on the coast, we pull from all directions. We were talking before you came, talking about how the history of the coast.
Right,
It's
right.
always had that pull from the different directions.
That's what I always tell people. So I mean, we have we're in Mississippi. Blah blah blah. We have a Buddhist temple in the city of Biloxi. There's
one out in like Latimer too, or
yeah,
something like
that too. There's a Hare Krishna ranch in Hare Krishna ranch in
Harry Christus, they're down the road.
like Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
I'm Mississippi,
And then you've
checked
got
all of my anthropological background
Where's
on
that
Canada.
at?
That's in Career.
and then there's
Career,
there's
Mississippi.
an Amish farm that
Yeah.
supplies to the Amish store
But
that's
so-
right here near Rouse's.
Yeah. So
And Good Karma and all that. stuff.
Good Karma is
Oh,
actually
fantastic.
run by the people who also run the Hare Krishna.
Right.
But so we have this unbelievable mix of people. We have in the Biloxi Public School District, there are kids that are native Tagalog speakers. They're Filipinos. Native a plethora now of native Spanish speakers. There's still kids coming from Vietnam with their families. Then you get into the Cajun history and the Croatian. There's an unbelievable cultural history here. But then, like, people that hate on Mississippi and whatever, and we should all be very proud to be. I mean, I'm very proud to be from here because we've exported people like Jim Henson. I mean, I say this all the time, but like my ultimate goal is to join the ranks of legendary Mississippians like Jim Henson and James Earl Jones. Like you could run down the list.
It's amazing.
It's unbelievable.
You mentioned, I'm like waiting for music, and you get the Muppets. We talked about the Muppets
The
even
Muppets,
earlier too.
I mean,
Well, we actually
come
did
on.
talk about the Muppets
Yeah.
earlier.
And that
you
goes
missed
back
that.
to the music.
But yeah, I was thinking, waiting for some music. We got Jimmy Rogers and Elvis and BB King and all this, and and Jim Henson, which is obviously, I mean, he should be. He died the same day. I think Sammy Davis Jr. died.
Really?
Yeah, it was odd. I remember that day.
But so that's I don't know, that's kind of my soapbox moment. We have all this, and there's some really unusual and interesting stories about down here. And, you get into like the lore, for me, part of it's been like getting into the lore of the Dixie Mafia and digging into what's unique about being here. There's mysterious almost kind of things that do go on.
Sometimes the grittiness of a place.
Yeah.
It's like it's kind of, you go back to New York now. I always kind of like the Lou Reed New York, when Times Square was kind of gritty. Now you go places like Disney World.
Exactly. Well, it was all Disney finance.
You go to the bow, you lower, where CBGB's now is all high fashion stuff, and I'm thinking, this is not the New York that I remembered and that I liked, And it's terrible to say you like something dirty, but it was just the grittiness of the songs and the things, and it was inspired that. And
that's New Orleans.
And the coast, I guess, with Mississippi, the whole state in general, a lot of it's, it's because it's been a poor state throughout most of its history since the Civil War. So you basically going to have creative sometimes comes out of that element. So that's why we probably have exported so much greatness to the
struggles.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I definitely the scene that I saw flourishing when I was in Hattiesburg, and part of why it felt vibrant, although it was in opposition to something in that town, and like to the point that there's a friend of ours who got, cool guy, super creative, a little bit probably came off effeminate to most people that ran across him, but he was super creative dude. Got jumped outside of a bar that beat him near half to death. So he drags his bloody ass all the way back to his house, and then they're waiting at his house they knew where he lived. And so they beat him up again. And then what ended up happening later is through, like, he actually recognized the vehicle somewhere and got it traced, and it ended up being cops from actual Hattiesburg.
Good Lord.
And so
When was
this was back when I was there. It's been 90s.
Wow.
And so he split town. Like, there was a really creative dude doing a lot of things. And the house we were on, the street we were on, the street where he lived and where I lived, was known as being a bunch of freaks, a bunch of drugs and this and that. But the combination of the frattier side of the university that was right across the way and the general conservative bent of almost everything around there meant that we were definitely in opposition to something. And when I left Mississippi to go to Chicago, it was prompted by some really foul stuff that had a lot to say about what is, a friend of mine was murdered by some pilled up teenagers, and then, like, I definitely, now as an older person coming back here, it's easier to take things with a little bit of grain of salt. I went up to Hattiesburg, and I love, like, my friends are opening up an art gallery up there called the Shop. God damn it. But there's a guy named Heath Kleinke up in Hattiesburg. He's opening up a great art place. And now, like, I can see more of what's good that's happening there, on top of, like, it's still a conservative place, and we're still surrounded by conservative things, but there's art happening and good things happening. But as a young person, I definitely couldn't get out quite quick enough compared to the sort of, watching people try to come out as homosexual in Mississippi. Like, all my friends, not all my friends, that would be odd, but a lot of my friends, coming out in these small towns and just getting raked over the coals. And it just, like, I know we're here to promote it. And I absolutely, nowadays, like I said, with a more balanced view of things, I could definitely come back here and be really happy. And I love what's happening here. And, but at the time, you mentioned, like, grittiness being a catalyst, and definitely a large part of what spurred a lot of this great music that I saw in Hattiesburg was, we were surrounded by, like, people who were not like us.
That's why college towns like Athens and Chapel Hill, that's why they have been like they have throughout the years. And you go back to, you think about the South, but some of the best music that, obviously has come from the South, but some of even the more in the last, I'm showing my age here, but the, more closer in time, like bands like REM out of Athens and Pylon and these different ones. But they came from towns and areas that were, college towns, usually, like, it's opposition. You got a reason is young people are looking at something to change things and that have you. And that's that's the area here on the coast, like I mentioned earlier, because we don't have, it's such spread out, so it's a little different in that area. But it's but if you don't want to change things, you leave it. You come back to it, like you said. You come back here, you can make a difference by what you put into it.
There seems to be, too, on the coast, there seems to be a difference between, like, sort of old money conservatism and then a sort of a boat culture, like a libertarian, like, let's get on our boats and go to the Bahamas type of folks. Like, Bay St. Louis doesn't come off to me as a super conservative place. It seems to be more like you mentioned Jimmy Buffett earlier, like this idea of boat culture and, like, the idea of staying on the water and going to these other places and stuff like that. So that's a whole nother.
And the coast too has always been way different than the rest of the state.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a big difference between, and that's why
between
you don't
Biloxi
see,
and Noxapater.
That's why a lot of times you don't see people take statewide office from the coast, because the rest is so different.
Republic of West Florida. I mean, a lot of people don't know that this region from Apalachicola, Florida, to some podunk town on the Louisiana line, I can't remember the name of, declared independence and had a Texas moment. So for 90 days was the Republic of West Florida.
It was. Had its own flag.
Yeah, and the flag was the Bonnie Blue flag, the blue field with the big one white star.
That seems awesome. Why have I not heard of that?
Yeah, because eventually the government, after about 90 days, the government marched in and kind of said, no.
The coast has had
Not
so
going
many
on.
flags fly over it, so it's kind of it's its own little
I'm
thing.
down with that. West Florida.
But
I know, right?
we have our own.
Florida.
We in the U.S. I feel like we forget about this thing called regional identity. We always talk about the South, but what about we have the Gulf South,
Coastal.
Coast,
And you talk about West Florida, but actually, you go over to Florida, it's so different in the Panhandle than you go down towards Miami.
Yep.
It's like a totally different region of the
I've got
country.
our motto for West Florida. Once we reestablish West Florida, it's like the rest of Florida, but with less face eating. Because we had the whole, what was that, bath salts?
Bath salts, yeah.
Yeah, there we go. So, it's like Florida without the face eating.
There you go.
And then the big
bath
blue
salt
flag.
free, bath salt free West Florida. We can make a new flag and everything. Look at that.
Has
We
a
won't
guy?
eat your face.
Has a guy? You said bath salt, right?
Bath salts.
Is that guy who still comes down and plays it? Have you seen him at the open mic nights? He sings the bath salt song.
No.
No.
He's an interesting. Have
Wow, no, I've
you?
not.
He plays the violin. He's an interesting guy.
Does he have a huge beard?
No, he's a young kind of a. I'm not gonna. He's just a.
No, he knows Papa Will.
Okay, I was going to say, that's the
No,
only guy
no,
who plays
no.
violin that I see up
This
there.
is. I think he goes to
the
Mississippi
bath salt
College. One in.
He goes to
You know
Mississippi
what?
College and he has a song about bath salts?
But
I think I've heard this.
But
this
it's
song
actually,
before.
when I first heard it, I was like, of course, if he listens to this show, I don't want to say anything bad. But when I first said, well, oh God, what's this? But actually, after you've heard it a couple times, you start thinking, oh my God, the song's gonna stay in my mind for a while, But he's an interesting
We need to
character.
invite him the hell back out.
Hey,
Yeah,
so
let-
I haven't
okay,
seen
this
him
is
in a
an
while.
official message. If anybody knows who the
bath
bath salts
salts
guy is, please
Send him
let
to the
us
Monday Night
know.
Band.
Send
Well,
a
Dix
message.
knows
to-
who he is, so I mean,
Okay, good.
Oh, well, Dix
Good.
knows.
Dix
Yeah.
knows firsthand.
Well, if you want to be a part of the show, please send it the information anyway.
I'd be anxious to talk to the bath salts guy.
It's
The bath salts
that's the
guy.
one. He I gotta give him credit. He puts effort into what he does, and he's I think he's going into radio or something. He's actually he's different, but he's got some kind of a.
Branching out from bath salts.
But that bath salt song is definitely
So many jokes just lying away from that. subject.
Yeah, just leave that for another day.
Like, make no mistakes. Bath salts made me. You have to move
And
on.
I made bath salts.
Yes. But you have to move on.
At one time, that was maybe the highlight at the open mics. So it has evolved. It really has come along.
I just see him like getting an old vinyl player of like his favorite band and like lining the grooves with bath salts and just as it's going around just bath salts.
I don't know if it ever hit the States, but there was some horrible. It was called Crocodile. Have you heard of it?
Yes. Yeah.
It almost immediately you start having suppurating sores. So that like there's a selling point. Like yeah, you'll get mildly high, but your skin will start oozing. That's the hard part.
I will say this, Stefan. It's just definitely a conversational. He asked me the other night, or we just met recently, and he said about doing this, and actually Ben mentioned to you told me about you first, and I thought, okay, talk Mississippi Coast, singing music, whatever. That's always my subject. This has definitely we've covered everything.
Yeah, I think we definitely have.
Covered quite a bit.
Yeah, that's what I always tell people who have never been on the show or never heard it or anything like that. It's
And
like,
I've been checking them out. They're some good shows, and I've been enjoying them.
Mm-hmm. And I always tell them, it's like, they ask, what are we going to talk about? Like, let's get some notes together. And I'm just like, we can talk about anything. Like, it'll just go and it'll just flow or whatever. And like, that's how it gets to be the most interesting. That's how you end up talking about crocodile and creating,
I'm afraid
slogans.
West
I'm
Republic.
afraid when I play it back and listen to this, I'm going to say, oh my God, why did I get on that conversation? Why did I bring up bath salts? Why did I bring up this?
Should do a bath salts counter to see how many different times we can say bath salts, or already have said bath salts in the last 10 minutes.
Is this a longer session than usual, or is it?
Let's see. Slightly longer than usual.
Okay, because I'm here. Because you usually can't shut me up. I'm just getting started.
who here has not heard of crocodile? Have you heard of crocodile or whatever? A
little bit, yeah.
Okay. I just want to read on to this because I think it's so fascinating. I used to, I gave like a speech in front of a bunch of people about crocodile at one point because I saw it and I researched it.
Or I
saw it in a magazine.
Oh, okay,
it was like, I think it was like a Nat Geo magazine talking about like it was a year in the review, and it was like the craziest disease, the craziest technology, the craziest person, and like all this kind of stuff. It's known as desomorphine. Known as crocodile. It's a derivative of codeine, like heroin and other opiates, and it has a sedative and sedative effect. Is highly additive and is potentially harmful. Home-based manufacturing may contain unknown ingredients, or in fact, no dysmorphine at all.
Maybe that's how all the sores were happening, because they're injecting it in different parts of their body, and if they're using these weird...
Yeah, all you really need to know, I mean, I'm not going to post pictures of it, because it's pretty terrible, but, I mean, they call it crocodile because your skin starts to blister and sores to the point where you look like a lizard man.
You know what you're doing. Of all this conversation we've had so far, that's what people are going to take from it. They all want to check out the crocodile. They're going to, this is where we looked at these pictures, and then we can learn about it there. You know, oh my god,
this is going to be like everybody, like all the music we've talked about, and like
just went down the drain.
The psychedelic era and all this kind of stuff, and like people, you're just like, oh, you got to take acid and listen to Pink Floyd. We're going to be the first talk show that people are going to be like, dude, you've got to do crocodile and listen to the Coastal Noise podcast. It will change your life and your skin features forever.
And the bath salt song. That's
yeah. No, that stuff is crazy. I've seen just from like working in the medical field and stuff, the craziest thing out of any drugs that have ever come through like a hospital setting, the absolute craziest I've ever seen has always been, more than one occasion, been bath salts.
So people, they're still doing bath salts. That's still a thing?
Yes.
Like,
yes.
What time frame did you see that?
All the time.
All the time?
I mean, like
bath salts all the time?
I mean, it's kind of a spare thing. The reason it got crazy is because people made it illegal. The government or whoever makes those things illegal made it illegal, and then people started making it like, you know, out of their house with whatever they could find. Yeah. And that's when you start having real problems like, oh, let's spray Raid on these coffee grinds, you know. And, you know, literally like it's things like that. And you know, we'll call it bath salts. Like that's a name. There's still a market for that where we can still call this shit that we just made a thing that people enjoy and people will buy it and do it and all this kind of stuff. And I mean, just you have people who are totally normal one day, and then the next day you come in and they're violently hallucinating for hours. They don't even know you're there. They're driving cars in their bed.
Oh my gosh!
They're all kinds of craziness. And you, from what I've heard from other people that have worked for years in the medical field, like, you know, like. They're like, I just don't see people coming out of it. Unless you get out of it, like, real soon before, like, the crazy stuff, before you start deteriorating your brain. It's just like, you know, there's no coming out of that. But, you know, in their defense, if they need a defense, if that's the right phrase to give them, it's like,
it's a bath salt.
If you give anybody a concoction of homemade things that you don't know about and call it one thing, like, yeah, you're going to be, like, major league screwed up, you know? So, and they just call it bath salts.
Well, let's just rename this episode an episode of Breaking Bad.
Bath salts.
Breaking Bad, you know, is what we got going here.
So, but wait, I do have a question though.
Go ahead.
So are they snorting actual bath salts? Or is
I have no idea what you do with bath salts.
It's just, but
I think. Well, no, you know,
it was a compound. I don't think it's actual. There's no. I don't think there was any.
It's not like
actually. It's not meant for baths, no.
Right.
It's a drug they end up just calling bath salts.
Oh, so it's just a thing called bath salts. Yeah. I mean, that's what I thought.
Oh, yeah.
So it's not like actual
Well,
bath salts.
They sold it in stores as like, these are bath salts.
Uh-huh.
But and that's what it was. But
And people started.
really, it was like
drugs,
bath salts,
yeah.
wink, wink, and then you'd go home and fill your bong.
So
or
there's no
whatever.
reason to discuss legalization of bath salt. Right?
Not really. I mean,
Yeah.
people are eating faces and
Driving invisible cars in their beds. with a-
absolutely.
Yeah.
Not to, if you're looking to cull the population a little bit and like whittle down the
Having
population,
Willy Wonka characters at their concert.
Yeah.
That's
Not seeing other human beings that are there.
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah, I just don't want to eat. I just don't want to eat people's faces. That's call me traditional.
Yeah, that's never been on my
Old
list.
fashioned. You're you're conservative. You belong here,
Conservative.
Eddie.
I don't want to eat faces. There's that.
Is that now the new mark for conservatism? Is we don't eat faces.
I'm drawing a really bright line in the sand. On this side is my Nutella sandwiches, which I very much like, and on the other side is eating faces. I want to stay with Nutella and less eating
I
faces.
think I saw a girl on Tinder the other day who had in her bio that she eats faces.
Really?
Yeah.
Did you match?
Yeah.
Left it. Swipe left.
Swipe left.
She could potentially be really crazy or just really freaky.
Never really wanted to
It
have
might be the
I-
bath salt's
eaten.
sister. You got a guy who sings the song.
I put out
yeah.
I put on. I've actually met pretty awesome people on the old online dating. I used to go to this site called Nerve that had awesome personals, and I came back to it after a while, and I wasn't really looking to date anyone, but I just put up the weirdest. And honestly, I do love gap teeth, and I love like crooked eyes, like cross-eyed, eye going this way, whatever. And I actually put that in the thing, and all my responses that I got back were people go, are you really looking? I was, yeah, I like that. I like gap teeth. What? It's like, give me a big old like Lauren Hutton.
How many years is it, Lauren Hutton?
Lauren Hutton, all that stuff. Lazy eye, loved lazy eyes.
Female.
You
Michael
could be a
Strahan.
very happy guy. You know what I'm saying? That's a market that a lot of people don't just actively
that's
try
what
to
I'm
tap
saying.
into.
So you've never been married, right?
No.
Okay. So you got a real picky taste in women. So
I'm sure there's plenty.
Lazy eyed,
Gap teeth, lazy-eyed
you'll
women
eventually
out
find
there.
your
can-
match. You'll find your
I
match.
can dress a deer. No, that's not true. That's not true.
You can beat those tubs. That's for sure. Sure, there's a whole world of gap-toothed, cross-eyed women looking for a.
I don't know about actually missing tooth. I'm looking for that
Missing
space.
tooth.
I'd
Now, there's
say no.
quite a few within the
That's
state.
different. That's sort of
Like a female
yeah.
Michael Strahan kind of, or like the full-on SpongeBob, where you could like.
or Michael
Put it-
Strahan himself. We'll
Yeah.
just go ahead and say that.
I
He's a
mean,
good-looking man.
He's a good-looking man.
if he shows up on
He
that.
wears it. He sure can wear a suit. I'll tell you that.
He does, yeah.
I think this conversation's really, really.
I think we're running off the rails
Rails?
here.
Where are the rails?
You
Where
ever
are the
cut
rails?
off the last like 20 minutes? Like, okay, and the bath salt starts here, so
No.
all of that is just going to get
No. It's
Nope,
all
it
in
was
there.
talked about, so it will be heard as well.
right on.
That's how it
Episode
goes.
44, right?
Just to kind of close it out, we'll get back onto music here. Just to kind of close it out, I have this album. And once again, I've called it an album. It's a magazine. This is a magazine. This is what this is. But I got this article that I thought would go really well with what we were talking about, and this is from Entrepreneur, which I subscribed to after I read this particular magazine. And it's an article that's talking about vinyl records, vinyl sales in America, and all this kind of stuff, with a specific emphasis to United Record Pressing out of Nashville, Tennessee. And the guy that they interview is Jay Miller, who's the director of marketing, and he just talks about how the climate is changing with vinyl and how they're selling it, and to make it more appealing for people of the digital age. And he talks about how 75% of the vinyl records pressed, new albums, not reissues, come with a code for a free digital download.
Yeah, that's killer. That's one thing that's really pushed me to buy them.
Right. Yeah. Great idea. And United presses run 24 hours a day, 6 days a week, making about 40,000 records each day. Mm-hmm. That capacity will double, they plan, by the end of 2015, when the new plant that they're building is fully operational. And then it goes on to the bottom here, which talks about sales and numbers and all this kind of stuff. U.S. shipments of vinyl LP records increased a whopping 35.2% from 2012 to 2013. And the trend continued in the first half of 2014 with vinyl records up 40.9%. In contrast to other physical forms of music, which are slowing down, CD shipments fell to 13.1% in 2013, while DVD audio plummeted over 700%. Vinyl LP sales totaled over 210 million in 2013, a fraction of the 1.2 billion achieved by full album downloads.
Yeah, like every music purchase entity has declined except for vinyl records, and they've exploded. The sales have increased like exponentially in the last 2 decades.
When like I said, I go to a lot of shows. I mean, like I said, I talked about 200 some shows last year.
Wow!
But what's so unique now is you go to the shows and you look for the bands that got their vinyl albums out. I mean, like you said, it got that digital thing within. Also, really was cool about it. I saw there's a band. I always buy the albums. I love the albums. I miss record stores, and Grimey. We talked about Grimey's earlier, and of course, there's a great one in Hattiesburg, T-Bones.
T-Bones really good.
And there's it's just something about vinyl, the smell of it, and everything. But one thing is another added thing that's kind of cool about vinyl that I like is the fact I went to the show in New Orleans and to see Larkin Poe, and they had their album finally came out on vinyl or the records, whatever you want to call it. It's on vinyl, and I didn't realize it, but the person Emily Scholl's mom, Susan, told me, said, "I think one of the girls kissed your album," and I was like, "What?" And they're very attractive girls, and besides they're very talented, but they're pretty too. And so when I got home, I went, "What?" And sure enough, there's a big kiss marker on the album, so that's kind of unique. You can't really do that on a CD copy, you know.
Yeah, another really good one is Mobile
Doesn't work
Records.
as well if you lick it. That's
and I was married. I have been married.
That guy licked your album.
I have been married for 26 years. That might stop the nights I talked about, girl kissing my album there.
No, but another good one is Mobile Records. And, it's right over by Bel Air Mall in Mobile, and they've got acres of stuff.
So it's
something interesting on the digital front, which is they're not talking huge amounts about it, but is getting into like Neil Young invented not invented, but he's got the high res like 48K audio player that's going to be doing like completely uncompressed. I forget if it's a new codec or what, but it's some sort of like super high fidelity 48K craziness, but you have to have this super high capacity player because
to be able to get that to play.
Yeah. But that's an interesting place when they get when storage gets cheap enough that you can have a couple terabytes in a little thing. Yeah, then you start putting those super high fidelity.
But don't you find I find the whole process of getting an album though, just the way the cover looks, the size,
it's its own art form.
When you used to pull it lost such of its in the last 20 years. It's just something about the losing that part of it was nothing like you mentioned Tower Records. Yeah, but there was something about going into places and flipping through the album covers and taking it. Like I said, it was actually a package. When you brought it home, it was. And it's hard for people, especially guys my age, that when I see everything, the little MP3s and little this and that, it's become also very not as much album oriented.
No,
everything's been
single.
The song. It's almost like back to the days of 45s. It just and it's. I think with seeing this rise of that. Is interesting. The only drawback about the vinyl thing is most CDs and albums usually have 12, 14 songs. There's no way you can put that on a single disc or vinyl, and you have to almost make a double. The cost it's just way beyond what most artists can come up with.
Yeah. That's my only grievance for Spotify is that the availability is so exponential that I just get lost in the weeds.
The tyranny of choice.
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm like, I can listen to all of the Rodrigo and Gabriela records. Like, but then all of Hans Zimmer stuff is on here. But now I want to listen to The Offspring. And now we're going to listen to Spanish flamenco music.
I've gotten my my micro payment from Spotify for my stuff that's on there.
Yeah.
I forget how many.
Oh, wow.
I forget how many plays, but it was like a however many cents.
Yeah.
For it was
I've heard some
grape
musicians
shot
say
stuff
that.
or
You know,
for
say,
what?
I got my
For
big check from
for my more
Spotify.
recent
It's
stuff.
like
Grape shot's not up
$3
on
or
it.
somebody. It's like.
I recently, just this past week, heard the statistics for Spotify and what they paid out to like the top number one single. Yeah. I mean, it was like in the thousands, like maybe 13,000 or something like that. Like they quoted Will Ferrell's. Not Will Ferrell. Pharrell. Is it? Who sings? Who sings?
What?
Who
That
sings?
bath salt is really messed you up there.
Yeah, happy. And,
That's
you
Will
know,
Ferrell, yeah.
That's Will.
He's a
Totally
drummer.
that
He's
guy.
the drummer for the Red Hot Chili Peppers.
He is,
And
as a
just
matter of fact.
Put out that.
But yeah, it's it's so minute and with MP3 players, iPods and things like that. Not only the compression, but just having everything right there. I tend to try to just put it away for days at a time, weeks at a time, whatever, until you think of it again. The convenience is there and all that good stuff, but there's something else to just having CD, and then also the fact that like maybe you shouldn't be listening to music all the time.
Yeah.
Maybe you shouldn't have a
Really?
music
Well,
player
I think
in your
that-
pocket at
No,
all
people
time.
don't, though. I think everybody gets to a point. Like if I'm on a long car trip, there's gonna be a couple hours where music is just pumping into my head.
Yep.
And then the podcast comes on, or the radio, or something like just
NPR?
completely. Yeah.
Well, me personally, I always find that the availability of digital is you can listen so much and got like you say, but when you put that vinyl on and that needle goes down, it's more of an
experience. It's more
Experience.
elegant. Yeah, and that's I have that.
You can't
same,
do that all the time.
Well,
You
even,
just
even
basically,
the simple part, even during that, because I was post vinyl. Everything I got really attached to was on a cassette, which is one of the worst ideas ever. Like the cassette, the idea,
What about 8-track?
Oh yeah, I still have a big 8-track player at home, but
Cool.
but just the whole idea of like trying to get to the song you need, sitting there holding that fast forward button doesn't make a lot of sense. But vinyl, yeah, you can move around.
Yeah.
But even with once CDs came around, I miss the whole idea of you put it on and you're listening and you pull it open and look at something. You're looking at the lyrics, or you're looking at
adds
the musicians.
It adds an extra level to the cultural vision machine. It makes the entity exist in different platforms that are all part of kind of the same thing.
I can't feel anything's done. Like I've put out my last few albums completely just buy a short run of it, because otherwise it just doesn't feel like you can put it on Bandcamp, you can put it on, have it on iTunes, whatever. But to me, it doesn't feel done until you have a bunch of things that look exactly the same. Like you're looking at a big pile of.
You guys ever seen the movie Almost Famous? I mean,
Yeah.
I always tell it's one of my favorite movies, but it's just something about that era of that time that when it's talking about in that movie, and but that part when the young guy brings out his sister's albums and pulls out and puts on, I think, Tommy and the Who, and that's something that just is special, and that's what that part of that movie was.
I love
all
the
about.
idea of, and these aren't the best sounding things in the world, but I'm looking into. I really want to print out, and there's a couple places that are still doing them, but the old flexi discs. Like the idea, you used to get a magazine, you get like a keyboard or a guitar magazine that have a little flexi disc in the middle of it. You put on the thing, and it's this tinny, sort of awful version of some song, Satriani in a guitar magazine or whatever. But I would love to put out some just really broke down stuff on a flexi disc. But there's still.
I've never heard of that.
I'd love for it to be kind of cheaper. Like the couple places that do it, they know that they're the only people doing it. So it's not like
so you still can.
You can still get them made.
You can still actually get them made.
I would
That's
love to have that
interesting.
made. Yeah, because it's basically has the vinyl grooves in it, but it's a flexible piece of plastic.
Yeah, I think that sounds a lot like what Jack White did on the A side of Lazaretto.
Did he?
Yeah, he did. I can't listen to it because I have a different kind of turntable. But you have to turn it up to like 70 RPMs.
Yeah.
So it's like inside. That's the most bizarre vinyl record I've ever heard of. So
I don't have that on vinyl. I don't.
Most every other vinyl record that has ever been made in the history of man, you put the needle on the outside and it moves inside. Lazaretto, you put it on the inside and it moves outside.
Right.
Yeah.
That's
I
what
heard
it is.
something about that. He was on talking to Letterman or something.
And but there's like an inscribed circle.
Yeah.
And like closer towards the inside, and there's two like hidden tracks on that inscribed circle. But it's a different material, and it goes at a higher, it spins.
That's
at
exactly
a higher
what I think
rate.
what he's talking about.
Yeah, so it's probably the same shit.
Yeah, but they used to do that. Like if you wanted to put music examples in a magazine,
Yeah.
they used to put.
It's like the sample CD. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And
Yeah,
be
that's
like,
That's crazy.
but I would love to put out those. I had the idea, and it's not doable yet because it's still too expensive per unit. But I want to do a label where you get artists to do a single song on a recordable greeting card, like a 2-minute greeting card, and then have another, like it's a pairing between an artist, like a visual artist, and a musical artist. You pick a song, and they have to. Each of those is like not mass produced, but when you record it, that's the only version of that song. It's a one-off, and then the artist will paint the cover, and then that becomes something you have it on your mantle. And they're like, "What's this weird thing? Looks like a birthday card," but then it's a one-off recording of this one song, and then painted by an actual artist. But I sourced the actual recording chips, and they're expensive. Yeah,
Expensive, yeah.
To get them that long, but at some point, I don't know.
I think it's great you brought the vinyl thing up. I think that's a good subject because
There was actually something that has tied into me with vinyl, and it's something that you told me about, Eddie. We were talking about Robert Johnson, and you were telling me that if you slow the records down, it sounds more natural, and there's this big debate about they think that they may have sped him up to make him sound more interesting.
It was completely the theory is that it was completely just an error, but they ended up. When they recorded them at too slow a speed, so that when they went to where they're pressing things, it did it too fast. Because it compensated. It was doing it at normal speed, but that sped him up. And that when you listen to that stuff brought back down to what they think it was, it sounds still amazing.
I think it sounds great because I looked him up on just finding some YouTube videos and stuff like that where people have slowed it down, and I loved it. I love the way his voice sounds. It's deeper. It feels like at a more bluesy kind of pace, like a little bit at some like if you. So the Red Hot, it sounds kind of cartoonish the way it, and I don't know if I'm imagining this, but it seems like the air molecules seem more at rest. They seem more like, But I just thought that was so cool, so I started looking around for some CDs that people sell online that they've slowed it down just to, straight up and buy it, and I couldn't find anything. So using some of the tools that I'm using right now for the podcast, I went on just with the King of the Delta Blues that I had already on my computer and rolled it back and slowed it down. And then I got so excited that I did that I started getting a bunch of other artists that I like and started slowing them down. I slowed down Jack White. I slowed down the Black Keys and Queens of the Stone Age and Jimi Hendrix Voodoo Child and like all this kind of stuff. And I love it.
An amazing version of Jolene by Dolly Parton.
Yeah, I've heard it. Yeah.
Where they slow it down. And they use that in, what was the TV show? It's a recent TV show. I think Blacklist. And towards the end of that show, they started playing that version of Jolene, which was actually someone who had just figured out that if you slowed Jolene down, because Dolly Parton had that amazing chirpy helium voice, you slow it down, all of a sudden it gets really grimy and funky. Oh, sorry, I'll get closer. And then also the voice ends up sounding almost like it's almost a Nina Simone, like deep. It's awesome. And then someone used the actual altered version for a TV show, which I thought that was an amazing confluence.
Yeah. I think the best group, I think Dan Auerbach from the Black Keys, like that's been my favorite thing to listen to with the slow down stuff. I mean, I'll get you a CD. I've been wanting to give you a CD and bring it to you. But I mean, it's just great that, it's slower, the pacing and all this kind of stuff, but like his voice just is a lot more deeper. He sounds like an old man, like a super old man, more so than his persona seems to suggest in a lot of ways, but it's very cool. I just want to slow everything down now. You know what I mean?
It's funny that you bring up that about Robert Johnson because you listen to the guys from from the same era who played like him, and to me they all sound really similar to that. Like if you listen to Tommy Johnson, or if you listen to even Son House, kind of has a little bit like that. But I don't know. Listening to Tommy Johnson to me sounds a lot like. Those tropes that you were talking about, he's kind of high pitched with his voice, sounds kind of fast. That it'd be interesting to examine that too. Talking about the slow stuff, I had a professor in college who was from Bakersfield, California, and was a drummer and auditioned for damn it, Shaka Khan and Rufus.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And didn't get it because he couldn't play slow enough.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, you listen to, like, I was working on Tell Me Something Good the other day. And we were working on it, and we were like, it's not that slow, is it? And we played it again. It was like, that's a different version. We kept saying, oh, that's a different version. It's like, no, it is that slow because slow is funky. It is, but it's fun because slow is funky, but it's all. There have also been different forays into slow as metal. So if you're a New Orleans metal guy, you know, I'm not really into it, but the hallmark of the New Orleans metal scene was slow is, you know. So if Metallica is fast, you know, Crowbar was slow. So it's like slow, you know,
or like Earth stuff.
Yeah,
like, Earth, Sano.
Yeah. So like slow, like sludge metal or doom metal as they call
Love
it.
it.
But
Love
you
it.
find it in the Melvins too.
Yeah.
Starting to get into them too. But yeah, just side
There's
note.
actually a whole, and this gets into a little bit more woo-woo, kind of weird metaphysical territory, but there's a group of people that actually think that 335 is the more natural pitch to have the everything calibrated to. Like there's people that tune
As opposed to-
their instrument at 440, A440
Yeah,
rather than that.
yeah.
There's a whole bunch of folks that and I think it's 335. It may be something else, but and there's a whole, and they point to the ideas that this somehow sounds more soothing and natural and human, which I can't speak to. I've heard both. I've heard people that are like, listen to the difference, and I can't tell. But there is a group of people that think that by changing what you calibrate that to by just a little bit, it becomes a more like a more natural feel and can be like healing and this and that. So stick that in your craw.
Based on this conversation, I'm just going to say that I'm going to slow this podcast down significantly for everyone's listening pleasure for the future.
The whole thing, or like a slow
Everything,
portion
every
of it?
damn part of it. We're gonna slow it way down. This is
5-hour
gonna be.
podcast.
We're running 2:25 right now. 2 hours 30 minutes here. I'm gonna stretch it out to say 4 hours. Eddie Dixon, Johnny Cole, Will Lamons. Thanks, guys, for
Thank y'all.
this has been a good time all around, and we'll do it again sometime. Yeah.
All right.
All right.
Good, guys.
Coastal Noise.